Tonight we kneel beside a trench of pale dust, where a small clay tablet waits under broken earth. In the late 19th century, excavators working in ancient Mesopotamia began uncovering thousands of cuneiform tablets. Scholars at the British Museum, Oxford, Yale, and American university collections later study these texts with patient care. Records from Sumer confirm that long before Greece or Rome, people were pressing laws, hymns, myths, and accounts into wet clay. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And as the room grows quieter, tell us where you're listening from, and your local time. You are not standing in a palace tonight. You're standing near mud brick walls, low and sun-baked, where the wind tastes of salt and river silt. The air is warm, heavy, and still. Somewhere beyond the trench, reeds bend beside dark water. A bird cries once, then vanishes into silence. In your hand rests a fragment no larger than a palm. Its marks look simple at first, like tiny wedges made by a careful tool. Yet each mark is a door. Each line carries a voice from a world that believed the gods live close enough to smell incense, hear songs, and demand bread. The strange thing is not that Sumerians feared the gods. That part feels almost natural. The strange thing is that some stories suggest the gods watched humanity with concern. Not hatred, perhaps. Not panic. Something quieter. A divine unease. You feel it in the oldest creation tales. Humans are made from clay, breath, blood, or divine planning. Depending on the tablet and tradition, they are shaped to serve. They grind grain, dig canals, carry offerings, and keep the temples alive. Very practical. Really, even heaven, it seems, prefers a reliable workforce. But the clay remembers more than obedience. A mainstream historical fact stands firm beneath this mystery. Sumerian city life grew in southern Mesopotamia during the 4th and 3rd millennia before the Common Era. Archaeologists from major American and European institutions have shown that writing emerged there partly from accounting, temple management, and administration. At first, clay tracked sheep, barley, oil, labour, and debt. Then it began to hold prayers, royal boasts, school exercises, and myth. A tool for counting became a vessel for eternity. That is where the unease begins to breathe. Because once humans write, they stop being only servants of memory. They become makers of memory. They can preserve a king long after his bones turn to dust. They can complain to a god. They can record a flood. They can copy a forbidden story in a quiet schoolroom while the afternoon heat presses against the walls. It is possible that the gods feared not human muscle, but human remembering. You imagine the tablet being made. A scribe sits cross-legged near a shaded wall. His reed stylus is cut at an angle. His fingers are stained with clay. Around him, boys repeat signs in low voices, making mistakes that teachers correct with the ancient patience of people who have always been slightly tired. Outside, a temple rises above the city. It is not a soft place. It is a mountain of labour, brick, baskets, ropes, and sweat. Priests move through courtyards scented with smoke, beer, dates, and wool. The god statue sits within its chamber, dressed, washed, fed, and treated like a living ruler. In Sumer, divinity had a household. The gods did not float far away in empty blue distance. They owned fields. They received meals. They had furniture, clothing, servants, singers, and accountants. Very glamorous, if one enjoys paperwork. And Sumer certainly did. Yet the tablets also preserve something stranger than administration. They preserve moods, anger, weariness, hunger, jealousy, regret. Divine beings in these stories are powerful, but not always calm. They plan, quarrel, decide, reverse decisions, and sometimes discover that their own creations have become troublesome. Here, the hidden question opens softly. Why would gods fear human potential? A quirky tradition from later Mesopotamian lore speaks of ancient sages who brought civilization's arts to humanity. They are described as beings connected with deep waters, teaching wisdom, ritual, craft, and order. Some later writers imagine them with fish-like features, which sounds almost charming until you picture them emerging from a dark river at dawn, dripping and silent. Scholars still debate how much of these traditions reflects old Sumerian belief, later priestly invention, or symbolic storytelling. That debate matters, because the tablets are not a single clean book. They are scattered voices, broken edges, missing lines, copies of copies. The truth arrives damaged. You turn the tablet slightly, and dust settles along its grooves. The marks do not explain themselves. They ask for patience. They ask you to accept that ancient people did not divide myth, history, politics, and religion as neatly as modern minds often do. A story could explain labour. A hymn could justify kingship. A flood tale could remember real waters, moral fear, and cosmic anxiety all at once. Ancient truth was layered, like river mud. Step too quickly, and your foot sinks. The Sumerians lived in a landscape that trained people to respect both creation and disaster. The rivers fed the fields, but they also shifted, flooded, and ruined. Canals brought grain, but demanded constant repair. A city could shine with bronze and lapis, and fall into silence when water, war, or politics moved elsewhere. Nothing was guaranteed. Perhaps this is why their gods feel so human in the tablets. They inhabit a world of unstable order. They must manage noise, hunger, labour, kings, offerings, storms, and human ambition. They create people to solve a problem, but every solution has a shadow. Humans can work, humans can build, humans can multiply, humans can learn. That last one is the dangerous part. For a moment, the trench around you grows still. The sun lowers, the broken walls glow red, then brown. You hear the soft scrape of a brush over clay. You sense that the tablet is not merely telling you what people believed about gods, it is telling you what people suspected about themselves. They suspected that humanity was small but not simple, fragile but not empty, made to serve, perhaps, yet carrying a spark that could rise beyond the task assigned to it. Not rebellion shouted under lightning, something quieter. A worker learning the account, a singer remembering the hymn, a scribe copying the divine secret line by line. And perhaps that is why the oldest clay feels unsettling. It does not say that humans defeated the gods. It does not even say that humans understood them. It offers a softer thought, half buried in dust. Maybe the gods feared the moment when clay began to know itself. You hold that thought gently. The evening settles over the ruins, and the old tablet cools in your palm. Somewhere in the distance, the river moves through darkness, carrying silt from mountains no one in the city has seen. The marks remain. The question remains. And the clay keeps breathing. You step into southern Mesopotamia when the morning is already warm, and the earth shines like baked ochre. The plain stretches flat beneath an enormous sky. There are no mountains nearby to comfort the eye, only reeds, canals, fields, mud walls, and the slow glitter of water moving through channels cut by human hands. The air smells of damp clay, animal dung, crushed barley, and smoke from small hearths waking across the city. Records confirm that the earliest Sumerian cities grew around temples, canals, storehouses, and crowded neighbourhoods. Archaeologists from institutions such as the University of Chicago and Oxford have studied sites like Uruk and Nippur's, early centres of writing, ritual, and urban life. These were not villages with bigger walls. They were organised worlds. You walk through a gate where donkeys complain softly, because donkeys have always understood civilization's unfairness. Men carry baskets of earth on their shoulders. Women grind grain with steady arms. Children chase each other between walls made from sun-dried brick. Somewhere, a potter turns wet clay into jars for beer, oil, and offerings. Everywhere people are working, The city is not silent, yet its sounds feel low and woven together. Sandals slap against packed dirt, reed mats creak, a bronze tool rings against stone, a priest's assistant calls out a ration of barley, a scribe scratches signs onto clay, measuring the day in wedges and numbers. Above it all rises the temple platform. It does not look like later marble temples, with columns made for admiration. It is heavier, earthier, closer to a man-made hill. Its walls catch the sun. Its steps seem to climb toward a sky that offers no answer. The god's house stands at the centre, and the city gathers around it like a body around a heart. Here, divine power is not distant. It is managed daily. The god must be honoured with food, music, clean garments, incense, and ritual care. Fields belong to temples. Workers serve temple estates. Storehouses fill and empty according to calendars, harvests, floods, and decisions made by people who speak in the god's name. It is a sacred system, but also a practical one. That combination is important. The Sumerian city is not merely a place where people pray. It is a machine of mud, grain, hierarchy, and belief. The divine presence gives meaning to labour, and labour gives the divine presence a visible body in the world. A quirky old detail survives in the imagination of these cities. Some temples kept elaborate daily routines for divine statues, almost like caring for a royal guest who never leaves the room. The statue might be washed, dressed, fed, and presented with music, very dignified, yes, though also faintly like babysitting eternity. You pass near a courtyard where offerings are being prepared. Bread cools on reed trays, beer sits in jars sealed with clay, dates stick sweetly to the fingers of a young worker who pretends not to lick them. Wool hangs in bundles near a shaded wall, smelling of animals and dust. This is where divine fear might become understandable. If the gods are imagined as rulers, then humans are their household staff, farmers, builders, singers, soldiers, and accountants. Yet a household with too many clever servants can become difficult to govern. A city makes that problem larger. Thousands of people breathe in one place. They exchange goods, rumours, songs, techniques, and complaints. Knowledge begins to move faster than command. A canal worker learns which official cheats the ration lists. A brewer knows which priest prefers stronger beer. A scribe learns the names of fields, debts, offerings, and families. Memory spreads through hands and voices long before anyone calls it power. The city creates human potential by accident. There is an open scholarly debate about how much temple institutions controlled early Sumerian cities. Some researchers emphasize the temple as the central engine of economy and authority. Others argue that households, merchants, kin groups, and palace powers also shape the urban world. The debate remains alive because the evidence is uneven, and clay records often preserve administration better than ordinary feeling. Still, the streets tell you something the tablets only imply. No god digs a canal alone. No temple platform rises without backs bent under bricks. No royal inscription exists without a scribe trained to press words into clay. Divine order requires human skill at every level. That dependence is quiet, but it is enormous. Perhaps the gods fear dependence. You pause in a narrow lane where shade lies cool against the wall. The brick surface feels rough beneath your fingertips. Bits of straw show inside the clay. A fly circles your wrist. From a nearby house comes the smell of lentils and onions simmering in a clay pot. Life here is intimate and immense. The Sumerian world is old, but it is not primitive in the lazy way people sometimes imagine. It has contracts, schools, taxes, hymns, diplomacy, dispute, accounting, inheritance, skilled crafts, and careful astronomy and later Mesopotamian traditions. Its people know drought, debt, ambition, humour, devotion, and exhaustion. They are not shadows. They are close enough to touch. You look toward the temple again, and the structure seems less like a monument than a question. Who serves whom? The people feed the gods protect the people, The priests organize the offerings, the scribes record the movement of grain, the rulers claim divine favor, the laborers keep the canals alive. Every part depends on another part. That is where anxiety enters the old world. A system can be sacred and fragile at the same time. In a land where water must be controlled, fields must be measured, and cities must be defended, human intelligence becomes essential. It solves problems, but it also sees them. A person who can measure a field can question a boundary. A person who can count grain can notice theft. A person who can write a hymn can shape how a god is remembered. The sky above the city looks empty, but not peaceful. Heat trembles over rooftops. Dogs sleep in strips of shade. A line of workers crosses the open space with baskets balanced against their backs, moving in rhythm, almost like a slow procession. You can feel the city thinking. Not as one mind, of course. Nothing so simple. It thinks through markets, kitchens, workshops, temple rooms, fields, docks, and schoolhouses. It thinks through tired mothers, ambitious scribes, careful priests, stubborn farmers, and children memorizing signs with clay under their nails. This thinking is not rebellion yet, it is capacity, and capacity is never entirely obedient. By sunset, the bricks turn the colour of old honey. Smoke rises from low roofs. The canal reflects a strip of purple sky. In the temple precinct, music begins softly, perhaps for a god seated unseen in the inner room. You stand among people who believe the divine order surrounds them, yet beneath that order something human is gathering, not an army, not a shout, a deeper force. Memory joined to labour, skill joined to hunger, thought joined to clay. The city settles into darkness, but it does not sleep completely. Someone is still counting jars, someone is still whispering a prayer, someone is still shaping wet earth into signs that will outlive the hand that made them. And under the watchful sky, human potential continues to grow. Your fingers hover over the tablet marks as if they might still be warm from the scribe's hand. The clay is dry now, hardened by time, accident, or fire. Its surface is the colour of old bread crust. Along one broken edge, the signs vanish into absence, and the missing words seem almost louder than the words that remain. A tablet rarely speaks like a complete witness. More often, it murmurs through damage. Cuneiform began as a practical writing system in southern Mesopotamia. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Pennsylvania have long studied tablets that record rations, offerings, land, labour, myths, hymns, and royal power. The mainstream fact is beautifully strange. The same wedge-shaped script could count sheep in the morning and describe divine creation by night. That feels very human. You sit in a tablet house, a scribal school where boys learn signs by repetition. The room smells of wet clay, reed dust, warm bodies, and a little fear. Teachers in the ancient world were not famous for softness. A student presses a wedge badly, smooths it away, and begins again. His tablet is small enough to hold, but the burden upon it feels enormous. Writing must be learned slowly. A sign becomes a sound becomes a word becomes a name becomes power. In summa, to know the proper name of a god, city, office, or field is to place that thing inside an ordered world. Writing does not merely remember reality. It arranges it. You hear the soft tap of reeds entering clay. Some tablets speak of gods creating humans to carry labour once borne by divine beings. Some preserve hymns where cities are praised as cosmic centres. Others list offerings with almost sleepy precision. Bread, beer, sheep, oil, wool, dates. The sacred and the ordinary sit side by side, which is perhaps how sacred life usually works. One line calls to heaven, the next counts barley. The tablets do not shout their mystery, they accumulate them. A divine complaint appears in one tradition, a flood memory appears in another, a wise being descends from deep waters, a A king receives authority from heaven. A goddess weeps over a destroyed city. A human survivor listens when destruction approaches. In fragments, a pattern forms. The gods need human beings. Yet human beings become more than tools. They work, but they also sing. They serve, but they also remember. They fear, but they also ask questions. This is the uncomfortable centre of the clay archive. A quirky tidbit survives from scribal culture. Some school tablets include student exercises, corrections, and even awkward practice lines that feel strangely close to homework. Thousands of years pass, empires crumble, and still a young person is making mistakes while an annoyed teacher hovers nearby. Civilization changes less than we pretend. You look closer at a practice tablet. The signs march unevenly, a little too deep in places, shallow in others. The student is learning the discipline that lets memory leave the body. Until writing, a story depends on breath and repetition. With clay, breath becomes object. A myth can sleep in the ground. A complaint can outlast the complainer. That is no small transformation. Perhaps divine fear begins when memory becomes portable. A god may command a ritual, but a scribe can copy the ritual. A king may proclaim victory, but a tablet can preserve the boast long enough for strangers to doubt it. A priest may interpret a divine will, but written tradition gives later readers something solid to compare. Clay creates witnesses, of course. Scholars debate how to read these religious texts. Some historians treat them mainly as ritual literature, shaped by temple and school traditions. Others see echoes of older oral stories, political theology, environmental memory, and social anxiety. The debate is careful, because myth does not behave like a simple report. It is more like a sealed jar containing many scents. When opened, it does not release only one thing. You are inside that uncertainty now. Dust floats in a beam of light. Somewhere outside, a goat complains with impressive commitment. The scribe continues his work, apparently unmoved by livestock philosophy. His reed stylus presses another wedge. The tablet tells of gods, but it also reveals human confidence. To write a god's name is an act of reverence. It is also an act of containment. The divine name enters a human system of signs. It can be taught, copied, stored, catalogued, translated, and argued over. A god remains vast, but the written sign gives human beings a handle on vastness. That might be useful. It might also be dangerous. Imagine a temple official carrying a basket of tablets. Each tablet records food owed to a divine household. The god receives meals through ritual, but the delivery depends on human organization. The offering becomes valid because people measure, store, transport, and recite. A missing tablet could mean confusion. A dishonest record could mean loss. The divine economy rests on human hands. This does not make the gods weak in Sumerian imagination. It makes the world relational. Heaven and earth are tied together by obligations. Humans owe labour and worship. Gods owe protection, fertility, and order. When either side fails, the tablets remember distress. The tablets also remember grief. City laments describe ruins, abandoned streets, temples emptied, and people scattered. Their language is poetic, but behind the poetry lies real historical trauma. Cities did fall, armies did burn walls, families did lose homes. The gods in these laments sometimes appear distant, grieving or unable to prevent disaster. That is unsettling. If gods can abandon cities, then humans must preserve what remains. A hymn copied later can rebuild a lost sanctity in memory. A lament can make absence visible. A scribe can give destroyed walls a second life in sound. Writing becomes a kind of survival. You sense why the tablet matters. It does not simply record what humans did for gods. It records what humans did with divine stories. They preserved them, shaped them, transmitted them, and sometimes transformed them. The gods may have created humans for service, yet humans became guardians of divine memory. A strange reversal. The servant remembers the master. The created being preserves the creator. That thought lies quietly in the clay, like a seed under flood silt. As evening gathers, the tablet house grows dim. Students stack their practice pieces. A teacher wraps finished tablets in a cloth. Outside, the city sounds soften into cooking, footsteps, and the tired murmur of families settling near lamps. The sky darkens over the temple roof. A tablet rests on a shelf. No one knows which ones will survive. Perhaps an accounting list will be buried intact, while a grand hymn breaks into dust. Perhaps a creation story will lose its most important line. Perhaps a student's mistake will endure longer than a king's proud inscription. History has a dry sense of humour, yet this uneven survival gives the mystery its texture. The tablets speak in pieces, and pieces invite attention. You do not receive a clean answer about divine fear. You receive evidence of a world where human beings learn to store power inside clay. Power to remember, power to question, power to endure the silence of God. The room fades. The last light touches the wedges, filling each mark with shadow. The tablet no longer looks small. It looks like a doorway cut into earth itself, opening toward a time when words first learned how to outlive breath. And through that doorway, the old voices continue. Your mind drifts past the city lights and into a time without streets, walls, or human footsteps. There is only the older world of divine arrangement, where the earth is not yet crowded by voices. The rivers move without canal banks. The marshes breathe under morning mist. The sky seems lower, heavier, and closer to the face of the plain. Nothing human has named the fields. Nothing human has argued over their borders. The tablets suggest that Mesopotamian thinkers imagined order as something ancient, layered, and difficult to maintain. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago have studied creation traditions where gods exist before human labour enters the story. The fact is steady, though the meanings remain debated. In these myths, humanity arrives late. That lateness matters. Before humans, there are divine households, divine duties, and divine tensions. The world is not empty. It is occupied by powers already weary from managing existence. Rivers must flow. Food must be produced. Temples must be imagined before they are built. Rank must be observed, because heaven, like every committee, seems fond of hierarchy. A soft absurdity hides inside grandeur. Even gods have tasks. You feel the old landscape as damp ground beneath bare feet. Reeds scrape against your calves. Frogs call from black water. The scent of mud rises thick and green, mixed with the sweetness of decaying plants. In the distance, thunder folds over the horizon, slow as a giant turning in sleep. This is not wilderness in the modern sense. It is a world alive with presence. Every current, wind, storm, field, and star may belong to a divine pattern. Nothing is merely scenery. Everything leans toward meaning. In such a world, creation is not a single moment of brightness. It is administration becoming cosmos. Boundaries are drawn, duties are assigned, powers take their places. The universe begins to resemble a great estate, with ranks, supplies, labour, and obligations. Order is sacred. Order is also tiring. A quirky strand in later Mesopotamian thought imagines primeval beings and ancient kings existing in almost impossible stretches of time. Some king lists give early rulers reigns lasting thousands of years. It is wonderfully excessive, as if ancient scribes looked at normal history and decided it needed more thunder. Yet even this exaggeration serves a purpose. It pushes memory backward into a zone where history becomes mist. Long before recorded history, long before ordinary kings, there was a time that is no longer remembered clearly. The tablets do not let you stand there with certainty. They let you glimpse it through smoke. Scholars continue to debate how these remote timelines should be understood. Some read them as mythic expressions of sacred antiquity. Others connect them to political legitimacy, priestly tradition, or attempts to organize inherited stories. The phrase remains open because the evidence resists neatness. Ancient time is not a straight road, it is a deep well. You lean over it carefully. Down there, the gods seem less like distant perfection and more like figures inside a fragile system. They hold power, but power brings pressure. They command, but command creates need. They exist before humans, yet their world contains a problem that humans will later answer. This is the hidden timeline beginning to show itself, not a secret map carved under a temple floor, not a simple conspiracy whispered by candlelight, something older and quieter. The tablets preserve a memory of a universe where divine beings needed relief. Human life enters as a solution to that divine burden, but solutions can grow teeth. Before the first human hand digs a canal, the gods already know work. Before the first scribe makes a mark, the gods already know decision and disagreement. Before the first city wall rises, the gods already know the difficulty of keeping order from dissolving. The human story begins inside divine fatigue. That idea is strangely intimate. It does not present humanity as crowned from the beginning. It does not say you are born into glory. It says you are born into a workload, clay shaped for service, breath given for duty, a living answer to someone else's exhaustion. Not exactly flattering, still something unexpected hides there. If humans are made to carry divine work, then humans inherit part of the divine pattern. They must understand seasons, water, grain, tools, animals, memory, ritual, and cooperation. They must become competent in the machinery of existence. A worker who learns the system may eventually understand more than the system intended. A servant can study the house. The old marsh darkens. The sky reflects in pools like broken bronze. You hear wings beating overhead as birds lift from the reeds. Somewhere beneath the water, roots twist through mud. The world feels unfinished, but not empty. Creation waits like breath held in the chest. You sense why these stories could feel unsettling to later listeners. They do not make humanity the first concern of the cosmos. They place humanity after divine need, after cosmic order, after conflict, after labour. Humans are latecomers, brought into a world already shaped by decisions made beyond them. Yet latecomers can become witnesses. They arrive after the beginning, but they learn to tell the beginning. They did not see the first ordering of earth and sky, but they press those memories into clay. They are born after the gods, yet they become the ones who preserve divine antiquity. The irony is gentle and sharp. The oldest beings become dependent on the newer storytellers. Perhaps this is not fear in the ordinary sense. Perhaps it is the unease of any power that creates a helper and discovers a historian. A tool can be used, a servant can obey, but a historian can remember what rulers prefer to soften. Clay does not flatter forever. Night settles over the primeval plain. The reeds become black lines against silver water. The air cools, carrying the smell of river mud and distant rain. No human voice breaks the darkness, and yet you sense humanity approaching from the edge of the story. Not with trumpets, with hands, with hunger, with memory waiting inside unshaped clay. The forgotten age does not answer you. It only opens a little wider. You stand where time has not yet become history, and you feel the quiet pressure of what is coming. Human beings will be made for labour, but labour will teach them the world. They will be small under the gods. They will be fragile before flood and famine. Yet they will learn names, tools, songs, and signs. In the silence before humanity, the gods seem secure. Their order fills the sky. Their decisions move through water and storm. Their world has no human questions yet, and perhaps that is why it feels calm. But calm is not the same as safety. Somewhere, in the deep imagination of Sumer, the clay waits to be lifted, the riverbank waits for fingers. The first human shape waits in the mind of the gods, still harmless, still silent, still unborn. And already, the future is listening. For a moment, it feels as though heaven itself has grown tired. Not broken, not defeated, only worn thin by repetition. The old stories imagine divine beings carrying burdens, digging channels, maintaining fields, and performing the heavy work needed to keep the ordered world alive. The sky is vast, but even vastness seems to develop sore shoulders. In the ancient composition often called the Atraeus tradition, later preserved in Akkadian, the lesser gods protest against unbearable labour. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and major museum collections have treated this myth as one of Mesopotamia's most important reflections on creation, work, and divine society. The record confirms a startling idea. Humanity is made because the gods want relief. That's not the usual bedtime compliment. You stand beside an imagined canal before dawn. The mud is cold underfoot, and the air smells of riverweed, sweat, and wet earth. Shapes move in the grey light. They are not human yet. They are divine workers, bent over the world's necessary tasks, cutting channels, raising banks, hauling baskets, muttering beneath their breath. The sound is not glorious. It is the scrape of labour. The myth gives divine beings emotions that feel surprisingly familiar. They complain. They gather. They resent their burden. They want a change in management, which is perhaps the oldest political feeling in the universe. Even in heaven, somebody's apparently doing too much of the digging. This is where creation begins to look less like wonder and more like negotiation. The higher gods face a crisis. The workers cannot simply be ignored forever. Order depends on their labour. If they refuse, the structure weakens. The cosmic estate needs maintenance, and maintenance requires bodies, time, and obedience. So a new being must be shaped to carry the load. Humanity enters as replacement labour. You can almost hear the council chamber. The floor is cool stone or packed clay. Lamps burn with a faint smell of oil. Divine voices speak in low tones, not because they lack power, but because power often speaks softly when arranging someone else's future. The plan is practical. Make humans, let them bear the work. Let the gods rest. A quirky detail in some Mesopotamian creation traditions is the use of clay mixed with something divine, sometimes involving the blood of a slain god. It is darkly elegant, in the way ancient myth can be elegant while making modern people shift slightly under their blankets. Human beings are humble earth, yet touched by dangerous sacred substance. That mixture changes everything. Clay alone can be shaped, dried, broken, and replaced. Divine essence alone belongs to heaven, but clay joined with a trace of divinity creates a creature that belongs fully to neither place. It works in mud, yet dreams beyond mud. It eats bread, yet speaks to gods. It dies, yet leaves signs behind. Perhaps this is the mistake. Not a clumsy mistake, not foolishness, a necessary risk. The gods need workers capable enough to take over meaningful tasks. A mindless thing cannot maintain canals, grow grain, organize offerings, or learn ritual. The new creature must understand enough of the world to serve it. But understanding is not a tool that stays politely in one corner. Understanding wanders. There is an open scholarly debate over how directly these myths reflect actual social tensions in Mesopotamian life. Some researchers see the divine labour strike as a mythic mirror of human corvée labour, irrigation duties, and temple demands. Others caution that the story operates on a cosmic scale, turning human work into sacred explanation rather than simple social protest. The uncertainty is part of its power. You watch the first human forms imagined from wet clay. Hands press shoulders into being. Thumbs shape faces. Mouths wait for breath. The bodies lie quiet, soft, and unfinished, like figurines left near a riverbank. They do not know yet that they have been made to answer a complaint. There is sadness in that, and there is danger. The gods may hope for relief, but relief depends on capability. Humans must learn patterns of water, soil, seed, brick, animal, song, and sacrifice. They must carry baskets, yes, but also calendars. They must know when to plant, when to harvest, when to praise, when to fear, and when to endure. Every duty trains the mind. The burden becomes a school. You smell smoke rising from an unseen hearth. You hear reeds rustling beside the water. The first morning of humanity is not bright with triumph. It is damp, uncertain, and filled with instructions. Do this, carry that, bring food, repair the bank. Remember the offering. Obedience begins as survival, yet within obedience, memory grows. A worker remembers the canal's weak point. A farmer remembers the flood's height. A singer remembers the god's hymn. A mother remembers the ration that failed. A scribe, eventually, remembers everything that officials would prefer remained pleasantly vague. The gods wanted labour. They received witnesses. This is the quiet fracture within the myth. The divine plan solves one problem while planting another. Humans take on toil, and the gods gain rest. But humans also gather experience. They grow numerous. They develop skill. They inherit the intimacy of daily contact with Earth. They learn the world from below. Power usually sees from above. Labour sees from contact. It knows the weight of wet clay, the smell of spoiled grain, the sound of a cracked wheel, the mood of a river before it breaks its bank. Labour studies reality with the whole body. Such knowledge is not small. In the soft light of the canal, you understand why fear might not arrive at once. At first, humans are useful. They bring food to temples, sing for gods, raise walls, and keep fields alive. They seem obedient enough, apart from the usual human tendency to become complicated almost immediately. But potential grows quietly. It does not ask permission. The lesser gods lay down their tools. Their hands are free. The great houses of heaven grow calmer. Smoke rises from offerings now prepared by human beings. Bread appears on divine tables. Songs rise from throats made of clay and breath. The system works, and that may be exactly why it becomes unsettling. A creature too weak would fail. A creature too strong might challenge. The gods require something balanced between usefulness and limitation. Yet human life refuses to remain a measurement. Hunger sharpens it. Grief deepens it. Love binds it. Work disciplines it. Memory extends it beyond death. The worker becomes a storyteller. The storyteller becomes a keeper of origins. The keeper of origins becomes difficult to govern. Dusk returns to the canal banks. The divine workers have faded into myth, but the tools remain in human hands. Baskets pressed marks into shoulders. Mud dries on ankle. Far away, a temple waits for its meals, music, and incense. You feel the strangeness of being made for someone else's rest. You also feel the hidden freedom inside that burden. To carry the world is to learn its weight. To serve the gods is to discover their needs. To obey a system is to understand its seams. And once humans understand the seams, the old calm changes. The gods may rest, but the clay they shaped begins to wake. It moves through fields. It gathers in cities. It counts, sings, complains, remembers, and teaches its children how to do the same. The burden has been transferred, but so has the knowledge. You stand beside the first fields as dawn spreads slowly across the watered plain. The earth is dark from irrigation, soft enough to hold a footprint. Men and women move through the rows with baskets, hoes, cords, and quiet impatience. They are not symbols now. They are bodies at work, shoulders bent beneath the great bargain written into their beginning. Humanity has been made for service. Ancient Mesopotamian texts often describe people as caretakers of divine households, through offerings, food production, ritual labour, and temple support. Researchers at universities such as Yale, Oxford, and Chicago have examined how these ideas match the economic world of temple estates. The fact is simple, but heavy. Religion and labour were deeply joined. Bread for the gods began in mud. You feel the field beneath your feet. Water slides through a narrow channel, carrying bits of straw and green weed. The smell of damp soil rises with the heat. A worker pushes his heel against a broken bank, packing clay into the leak. Another lifts a basket of silt and mutters something unflattering about supervisors. Some truths are eternal. In this world, humans are valuable because they are useful. They dig, plant, harvest, grind, brew, weave, build, carry, sing, and pray. They become the moving parts of a sacred economy. Their days are measured in rations and obligations, but also in festivals, songs, kinship, and fatigue. The gods receive order through human repetition, yet repetition has a hidden effect. It trains attention. The farmer learns the timing of water, the miller knows the grain's texture by touch, the brewer smells when the mash has turned, the builder feels when a brick is too damp. Skill gathers quietly in the hands. A servant becomes an expert. This is where the human role begins to widen beyond its first purpose. The gods may want work completed, but work is never only work. It teaches method. It creates memory. It requires judgment. It forces cooperation. Even the most humble task can become a school for intelligence. A hoe can teach patience. A canal can teach consequence. A rationalist can teach suspicion. A quirky tradition from Mesopotamian myth says that human beings were fashioned from clay, sometimes with divine material blended into their substance. It is a strange recipe. Really. A little river mud, a little sacred essence, and suddenly the universe has complaints, poetry, and tax records. The mixture is funny only because it is profound. Clay makes humans earthly. Divine matter makes them restless. They belong to the fields, but they lift their eyes towards stars. They carry baskets, but they wonder who placed the burden there. They bow before statues, but they also carve, dress, feed, and sometimes repair those statues. The servant touches the sacred object. That closeness matters. A distant god can remain unquestioned. A god whose meals are prepared by human hands becomes part of daily routine. Reverence remains, but intimacy enters. People learn the god's calendar, preferences, festivals, songs, and silences. They see how divine power is represented, maintained, and protected. They learn the backstage of holiness. There is an open scholarly debate about whether ordinary Sumerians experienced temple labor mainly as devotion, obligation, social identity, economic pressure, or all of these together. Some historians stress sacred participation, others emphasize administration, hierarchy, and the demands placed upon workers. The clay records show systems clearly, but human feeling remains harder to recover. Still, you can imagine the feeling. A woman rises before sunrise to grind barley. The stone is heavy beneath her hands. Its rhythm fills the room with a rough, circular sound. She may think of children, debt, offerings, gossip, sore wrists, and the god who will receive bread made from this labour. Her work is sacred. Her exhaustion is real. The two truths do not cancel each other. A young man guides oxen through wet soil, watching the plough open dark lines behind him. He knows the overseer's eye, the river's mood, and the family's need. He is part of divine order, yes, but also part of human survival. The gods may receive tribute, yet his own household must eat. Necessity sharpens him. People made for work learn to negotiate, not always loudly, not always successfully. They learn where to save seed, whom to trust, when to complain, when to be silent, when to offer, and when to hide a little grain from the perfect mathematics of authority. Human potential is not only invention, it is adaptation. The fields shimmer under the climbing sun. Dragonflies hover near the water. A child runs along the bank carrying a bundle of reeds, then stops to watch older workers with serious eyes. Already, the system is teaching the next generation, not through formal lessons yet, but through repetition, imitation, correction, and hunger. Knowledge passes sideways. It passes from mother to daughter, from brother to brother, from worker to worker, from old hands to young hands. The official record may name supervisors, temples, kings, and gods. Beneath it, Practical knowledge flows like water under reeds. No tablet can hold all of it. Perhaps this is what the gods cannot fully control. They can assign labour, but not every lesson labour creates. They can demand offerings, but not every thought formed while grinding grain. They can command service, but not every quiet comparison between divine need and human suffering. A worker's mind has shadows. A worker's mind has doors. You walk toward the city as the morning grows bright. The temple rises ahead, fed by the surrounding fields. Grain moves inward, beer jars move inward, animals move inward, wool, oil, fish, dates, and labour move inward. The city's sacred centre depends upon 1,000 ordinary acts performed beyond its walls. Dependence hides inside grandeur. The god's house looks powerful because so many human lives sustain it. The platform seems to rise toward heaven, but its bricks were shaped by hands. Its storerooms seem full by divine favour, but their abundance comes through planning, weather, toil, and record-keeping. The gods receive the world through human organisation. That is a dangerous arrangement, not because humans are openly rebellious from the beginning. They are too busy, mostly. Civilization leaves limited time for dramatic speeches when the irrigation bank has collapsed again. The danger lies in competence. Every year of work makes people better at carrying the system. Every generation understands more of its patterns. Eventually the servant knows where the keys are kept. The clay beings made for labour become makers of tools. The makers of tools become builders of cities. The builders of cities become keepers of offerings and names. The keepers of names become interpreters of divine will. The role expands, almost unnoticed. Evening settles across the field. The workers return along the canal, feet caked with drying mud. Their shadows stretch long over the earth. In the distance, smoke rises from cooking fires, and the temple wall glows in the last amber light. You feel the first purpose still cling to humanity. Serve, carry, provide. But beneath that purpose, another motion has begun. Humans are made to bear the burden, have discovered the world through bearing it. They know its weight, its cracks, its seasons, and its needs. They are not free from the system, but they are no longer empty within it. The clay has learned the field. The hands have learned the pattern. The servants have begun to understand the house. In your ears, the scrape of labour changes into something quieter than command. It becomes thought. A hand lifts wet clay and knows its weight before the mind names it. A woman ties reeds into a bundle and judges their strength by touch. A child watches a potter turn earth into a vessel, and some small door opens inside the child's attention. The world has rules. The rules can be learned. This is the gift hidden inside clay. Ancient Mesopotamian culture placed great value on wisdom, craft, memory, and skilled speech. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Pennsylvania have studied tablets where wisdom is not merely cleverness, but the ability to order life properly. The fact is clear enough. Knowledge in Sumer was sacred, practical, and socially powerful. A person who knew signs could enter another world. Not a world of wings or stars, necessarily. A world of records, names, calculations, hymns, contracts, and royal memory. The scribe did not simply write. He crossed a boundary. He moved between spoken life and preserved life, between the day's noise and the long silence of tablets stored in rooms. That crossing is dangerous. You sit near a doorway where the afternoon light lies in a bright rectangle on the floor. A young apprentice presses wedges into clay, copying signs that represent grain, water, God, king, field, and life. His hands are small. His brow is furrowed. He is not becoming a warrior, yet he is learning a sharper instrument. He is learning permanence. A quirky school tradition survives in old texts that describe student life with complaints, punishments, pride, and rivalry. One can almost hear a tired pupil insisting that he studied very hard, while his teacher remains tragically unconvinced. Even in the ancient world, homework, found a way to haunt humanity. Yet beneath the humour is a deeper transformation. Writing separates memory from the body. A spoken word disappears unless someone carries it. A written word remains. It can be stored, copied, hidden, discovered, misunderstood, corrected, and loved by strangers. The dead begin to speak without breath. That is not ordinary skill. That's almost divine. Perhaps the gods fear this small miracle. Not because humans become equal to them, but because humans acquire one of the powers once held by heaven alone. They can extend presence beyond the visible moment. They can summon an absent king by reading his name. They can restore a hymn after the singer has vanished. They can resist forgetting. Memory is a rebellion against disappearance. You feel the weight of that idea as the room cools. On a shelf nearby, tablets dry in neat rows. Some record ordinary matters, rations, deliveries, workers, animals. Others contain prayers that tremble with need. A human voice asks a god to listen, to forgive, to heal, to return favour. The same hand can count barley and plead with heaven. This blending gives human potential its strange depth. Intelligence is not only the ability to calculate, it is the ability to connect things that power prefers to keep separate. Food and worship, labour and justice, sickness and guilt, flood and memory, divine command and human suffering. The mind makes patterns. Some patterns comfort, some patterns accuse. There is an open scholarly discussion about how widespread literacy truly was in early Mesopotamian cities. Many researchers argue that writing belonged mainly to trained elites. While oral tradition carried most people's stories, others stressed that even limited literacy could shape entire societies through administration, law, ritual, and education. The debate matters because a few trained hands could change the memory of many lives. A small class of writers can alter the horizon. You walk through the city's edge at dusk. The scent of baking bread mixes with smoke and river damp. A carpenter smooths a plank with careful strokes. A metalworker watches copper glow in a furnace, reading colour as if it were language. A healer crushes herbs and listens to an old woman describe pain in her chest. Knowledge is everywhere, not always written, not always honoured, but present. Human beings gather knowledge through bodies as much as through tablets. A shepherd knows illness in the gait of a sheep. A boatman reads the river's surface. A midwife knows the breathing of fear and birth. A singer knows which melody makes mourners weep without breaking them. This is potential beyond control. A ruler can command bodies for labour, but cannot fully command what bodies learn. A priest can teach a ritual, but cannot fully govern how a listener imagines the god. A god, in the mythic sense, can assign purpose, but not every meaning that grows from purpose. Meaning is unruly. It sprouts and cracks. You pause beside a kiln where heat pulses against your skin. Clay vessels stand within, hardening in red light, once soft, now durable, once shaped by fingers, now ready to hold oil, grain, beer, or ashes. The clay changes because it endures heat. So do people. Labour hardens skill. Suffering deepens memory. Loss makes questions sharper. Joy teaches the value of what cannot be counted. Every ordinary life becomes a hidden archive, filled with details too small for royal inscriptions and too sacred to vanish completely. The gods may have wanted service. Human beings developed inwardness. That word does not appear on the tablets in a modern way, but the feeling is there, in prayers of lament, in proverbs, in disputes, in hymns, in stories where humans suffer under forces larger than themselves. The clay records voices aware of uncertainty, longing, guilt, hope, and complaint. And a tool does not lament. A tool does not wonder why. A tool does not ask for justice in the dark. The gift within clay is not only cleverness, it is the ability to hold contradiction. Humans can fear the gods and negotiate with them. They can serve temples and quietly resent officials. They can accept mortality and still carve names into the future. They can be small and immense at once. Night folds over the city. Lamps appear behind reed screens. Somewhere, a lullaby rises, soft and repetitive, carrying a child towards sleep. The melody is not preserved on any tablet you can hold, yet it belongs to history as surely as a king's inscription. Human potential is not always monumental. Sometimes it is a song remembered by one child. Sometimes it is a recipe, a warning, a joke, a gesture, a prayer whispered into wool before dawn. These things rarely survive in museums, but they made civilization breathe. They formed the unseen mind beneath the written world. Perhaps divine unease begins here, in the realization that humans cannot be reduced to their assigned function. The clay body works, yes, it carries, digs, grinds, and kneels. But inside that body, memory gathers, skill refines, imagination wanders beyond the field. The servant begins to dream. The worker begins to interpret. The clay begins to keep secrets of its own. You look down at your hands, dusty in the fading light. They seem ordinary, almost fragile. Yet hands like these learn to shape temples, measure stars, write laments, heal wounds, cradle children, and preserve the names of gods. The gift was never loud. It was patient. It waited inside touch, speech, craft, and memory. It grew through repetition, through hunger, through teaching, through grief, and in the old stories, perhaps the gods sensed that something made for service had become capable of more than service. The clay had received its task, then it discovered its mind. The city becomes quieter as you approach the sacred center, where walls gather around stored abundance. The temple precinct smells of warm brick, wool, sesame oil, and old smoke. Grain lies sealed in jars, beer cools in shaded rooms. Account tablets rest on shelves, each one holding a small decision about food, labor, animals, or time. The place feels holy, but also intensely organized. Nothing here survives on atmosphere alone. Records from Sumerian and later Mesopotamian cities confirm that temples served as religious, economic, and administrative centers. Archaeologists and historians from Chicago, Yale, and Oxford have studied temple households as institutions that owned land, employed workers, received offerings, and redistributed goods. The fact is steady. A god's house required management, a divine machine made of clay. You stand near a storeroom where workers carry baskets through a low doorway. Their feet leave dusty prints across the floor. A clerk checks deliveries with a stylus in hand. His face calm in the way only record keepers can be calm while everyone else is sweating. Somewhere deeper inside, singers prepare for ritual, and the air trembles with low practice notes. The system has many parts. Fields produce grain, shepherds bring animals, brewers make beer, weavers prepare cloth, cooks bake bread, priests conduct rites, scribes record the flow of goods, labourers repair walls, clean courtyards, haul water, and sweep away the mess left by both humans and sacred expectation. Even holiness sheds dust. At the centre stands the divine image, hidden from most eyes. The statue is not merely decoration. In Mesopotamian thought, it can function as the embodied presence of the god within the temple. It is fed, clothed, honoured, guarded, and approached through ritual care. The god lives through structure. This is why the temple feels like a machine. Not cold, not lifeless, but patterned. Every offering has a route. Every festival has a calendar. Every jar has a count. Every roll fits into the greater rhythm by which human labour sustains divine order. You hear a door hinge creak. A priest passes carrying a vessel. His robe brushes softly against his legs. Behind him, an assistant carries bread, still warm enough to scent the air. The food enters the god's chamber, and for a moment ordinary baking becomes cosmic service. That transformation is powerful. It is also vulnerable. A quirky detail from Mesopotamian ritual life is that divine statues could receive elaborate treatment, including washing, clothing, and meals presented with courtly care. It is majestic, certainly. Yet it also leaves the modern mind quietly amused by the thought of a god's wardrobe needing responsible supervision. Still, the humour fades when you feel the meaning. The statue's care keeps the bond between heaven and city alive. If the god is neglected, order trembles. If the rituals fail, anxiety enters. If offerings stop, the divine household becomes silent, and silence in a temple is never simple. Human beings must keep the sacred world moving. The temple machine depends on trust, memory, and repetition. It needs people who know the right words, gestures, quantities, and timings. It needs people who understand storage, delivery, purity, and authority. It needs trained minds as much as willing backs. This is where human potential becomes institutional. A single clever worker can adapt. A trained temple system can preserve, multiply, and refine knowledge across generations. Techniques do not vanish when one person dies. They are taught. Records do not evaporate when one official leaves. They are copied. Ritual words do not depend entirely on one singer's memory. They are guarded. The temple turns human skill into continuity. There is a scholarly debate about whether early Sumerian temples should be seen as dominant economic engines, or as one powerful element within a wider social landscape. Some researchers emphasize temple control over land and labour. Others point to households, merchants, palaces, and local networks as equally important. The disagreement continues because surviving tablets illuminate institutions better than private life. Clay loves bureaucracy. It is less generous with whispers. Even so, the records reveal a world where sacred authority required human calculation. That requirement creates an uncomfortable truth. The gods may stand above society, but the god's presence in the city depends on human maintenance. The more complex the temple becomes, the more it relies upon trained people who understand its workings. Control creates specialists. Specialists create dependence. Dependence creates unease. You move through a courtyard where sunlight falls in sharp shapes across the floor. A boy sweeps dust toward the wall. Two women carry folded textiles. An old man repairs a reed basket with slow, exact fingers. None of them appears dramatic, yet each holds a thread in the sacred fabric. If one thread fails, another must tighten. A temple system gives people identity. It tells them where they stand, whom they serve, what they owe, and what the gods expect. But systems also teach people to see pattern. Once a person sees pattern, they may notice imbalance. Once they notice imbalance, they may begin to ask quiet questions. Who measures the measure? Who counts the counter? Who speaks for the god when the god is silent? These questions need not become rebellion. Often, they become caution, rumour, satire, prayer, or private thought. That is already enough to make power uncomfortable. A controlled society does not fear only weapons. It fears interpretation. The temple tries to organise meaning. Human beings keep producing more of it. You enter a storage room, the air is cooler. Tall jars lean in shadow. Their clay seals marked with impressions. The smell is thick with grain and age. A small tablet lists quantities, names, and obligations. Each line seems humble, yet together they form a net. The net catches food. The net catches labour. The net catches memory, but nets reveal their own knots. Anyone trained to read the tablet can see how goods move. Anyone who handles stores can understand shortage, surplus, preference, and privilege. The sacred machine cannot function without transparency among its operators, even if that transparency is limited. A hidden power grows in the act of keeping accounts. It is not mystical, it is procedural, which is somehow more unsettling. The person who knows the procedure can continue the system, repair it, slow it, or bend it. Human potential does not always arrive as fire stolen from heaven. Sometimes it arrives as inventory knowledge, very glamorous, naturally, yet in ancient Sumer, such knowledge could shape entire lives. A ration tablet might determine who eats. A field survey might define obligation. A ritual calendar might gather the city into collective memory. A temple account might outlast the official who ordered it. The sacred machine teaches humans to think beyond one lifetime. Even the building carries that lesson. Bricks crumble and are remade. Floors rise as debris accumulates. Walls are repaired over older walls. The temple is never only one temple. It is a sequence of rebuildings, a layered body of faith and labour. You feel the ground beneath you thick with earlier foundations. The god's house stands because generations accept the work of renewal. That renewal trains people to imagine continuity, not just today's bread, but tomorrow's offering. Not just this harvest, but the next canal cleaning. Not just this ruler, but the old order that claims to stretch back into sacred time. A machine that thinks in generations creates people who can think in generations. That is another dangerous gift. Outside, evening settles over the temple court. The last deliveries arrive. A scribe smooths the edge of a tablet with his thumb. Somewhere behind a screened doorway, a hymn begins, low and measured, rising like smoke into the darkening air. The temple glows with purpose, yet beneath its calm, a delicate tension remains. The gods are honoured by human systems, but human systems require human intelligence. The divine household is powerful, but it is also serviced, recorded, repaired, and remembered by clay-born hands. The sacred machine continues turning, and with every turn, it teaches its operators more. The palace stands beyond the temple courts, lower than heaven, yet higher than ordinary streets. You approach through packed earth lanes where guards lean beside doorways and servants move with practiced speed. The smell changes here. Less damp grain, more cedar oil, leather, hot metal, and wool dyed with costly colour. Power has its own weather, and everyone seems to feel it. Kings in Sumer claimed authority through divine favour, sacred appointment, and successful protection of the city. Historians at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Chicago have studied royal inscriptions showing rulers building temples, digging canals, defeating enemies, and presenting themselves as chosen caretakers. The fact is clear. Kingship stood between gods and people. That position was magnificent. It was also dangerous. A king is not a god in the simplest sense, though some later Mesopotamian rulers were treated with divine language. He's a mediator, protector, builder, judge, warrior, and public servant of the gods, at least in the official poetry. He must keep heaven satisfied and earth obedient. A relaxing job, obviously. Perfect for anyone who enjoys insomnia. You stand inside a palace courtyard where sunlight burns against white plaster. A messenger kneels, dust still clinging to his knees. A scribe waits with tablet ready. Officials gather beneath a shaded awning, each carrying a piece of the city's burden. The king listens. His crown is not only ornament, it is pressure made visible. He must claim that divine order moves through him, yet every failed harvest, lost battle, broken canal, or angry god can stain that claim. The people may not speak openly, but they notice. People always notice. Authority depends on belief. Belief depends on performance. The royal figure becomes a human answer to divine uncertainty. If the gods are remote, the king acts. If the gods are angry, the king repairs temples. If enemies threaten, the king leads soldiers. If famine comes, he must explain, respond, or blame someone with impressive confidence. This is where human potential turns political. A ruler gathers labour, commands armies, directs building, and shapes memory through inscriptions. He stands as proof that a human being can organise thousands of lives under a single name. That ability might reassure the gods. It might also trouble them. Power concentrated in human hands is still human power. A quirky detail from Sumerian royal tradition is the title sometimes translated as shepherd of the people. It sounds gentle, almost pastoral, until you remember that shepherds also count guide, separate, and occasionally strike wandering animals with sticks. Ancient metaphors are rarely as cuddly as they appear. The shepherd king cares for the flock. The flock provides labour, taxes, soldiers, and praise. In palace rooms, scribes prepare royal words with care. They record temple building, canal digging, enemy defeat, and justice granted to the vulnerable. The inscriptions are polished versions of reality. They do not usually mention confusion, bad moods, or the official who misplaced 3 jars of oil and ruined the morning. Royal memory prefers clean lines. Yet even polished inscriptions reveal anxiety. Why proclaim divine favour so often unless favour must be constantly renewed? Why describe temple building again and again unless the relationship with gods requires visible proof? Why boast of justice unless disorder presses at the gate? The king is a bridge. Bridges tremble under weight. There is an active scholarly debate over how centralised early Sumerian kingship truly was. Some researchers emphasise strong rulers and palace authority, especially in times of war. Others see shifting balances between temple institutions, councils, elite households, and royal households. The evidence is rich, but uneven, and each city had its own pulse. Still, the pattern remains compelling. The king stands in a human body, carrying claims larger than any body should bear. He must be close enough to the gods to command reverence, but human enough to lead armies and settle disputes. He must be exceptional, but not so exceptional that priests, elders, or rival families decide he is inconvenient. Power requires choreography. You hear sandals on polished floor, a cupbearer pours drink, a royal seal presses into wet clay, leaving an image that marks authority more vividly than a spoken order. The seal rolls across the surface, and a small world appears. Figures, animals, symbols, movement, a compressed theatre of legitimacy. The mark says this command belongs to power, but every seal also emits a fear. Without a seal, the order may be challenged. Without writing, the command may be altered. Without witnesses, authority may dissolve into rumour. Human systems need safeguards because human beings are inventive in both loyalty and disobedience. A locked door proves someone might open it. A sealed tablet proves someone might lie. A throne proves someone else might want it. In this palace, divine fear becomes tangled with royal fear. Gods may worry about human ambition, but kings certainly do. The ruler must control workers, warriors, scribes, priests, merchants, and family rivals. He must persuade the city that his rule reflects cosmic order, not merely personal appetite wearing expensive wool. Sometimes, perhaps, even he wonders. At night, a king may sit alone near a lamp and listen to the palace settle. Wood creaks, guards murmur, a dog barks from a distant lane. The city he rules is full of sleeping people who dream without his permission. That thought alone could disturb a sensitive ruler. Human minds remain private. No palace can fully enter them. The king can command bodies, collect grain, sponsor hymns, raise temples, and send soldiers. He can commission words that praise him after death, yet he cannot guarantee how people remember him in kitchens, workshops, and fields. Public memory and private memory are rarely identical. This gap is powerful. A ruler may be praised in clay while mocked in whispers. He may be called beloved of the gods while farmers curse his labour demands. He may build a temple that impresses heaven, while workers remember only the ache in their backs. Human potential includes double vision. It sees the official story. It also sees the cost. The gods, if imagined as rulers above rulers, might recognise this problem. Once humans learn hierarchy, they also learn its weaknesses. Once they build thrones, they imagine replacement. Once they hear claims of divine favour, they notice when favour looks suspiciously convenient. The political mind awakens slowly, not in a modern assembly, not under banners, in counting houses, palace corridors, temple courts, army camps, and household conversations after sunset. It awakens wherever people compare what power says with what life feels like. That comparison is dangerous. You step onto the palace roof as evening lowers over the city. The temple rises in one direction. Fields darken in another. Smoke climbs from houses in thin blue threads. The king's city seems still, but beneath the stillness moves a vast human current. Workers, priests, scribes, mothers, soldiers, merchants, children. Each life carries its own small knowledge of order and strain. The king stands between them and the gods, but standing between forces does not mean controlling them. It means being pressed by both. Perhaps this is why kingship feels haunted. It reveals that humans can imitate divine structure. They can create offices, rituals, commands, monuments, archives, laws, and ceremonies of obedience. They can make power visible on Earth. They can turn a city into an image of cosmic hierarchy. And if humans can imitate divine order, they may one day revise it. The palace darkens. A final message is sealed. Somewhere, a singer practices a royal hymn, making a mortal name sound almost eternal. The king remains high above the street, yet not beyond fear. The human sits near the summit of the system. Above him, the gods. Below him, the city. Within him, the knowledge that clay-born beings can rise farther than expected. The city does not become dangerous in a single moment. It grows dangerous by breathing. At sunrise, smoke lifts from hundreds of roofs. At midday, streets fill with sellers, workers, animals, officials, children, and strangers who carry news from other towns. At night, voices thicken behind mud-brick walls, where families speak more freely than they would in any courtyard of power. This is the noise of mankind. Mesopotamian flood traditions often describe humanity becoming too numerous, too loud, or too disruptive for divine comfort. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Chicago have studied these stories as mythic reflections on population, labour, mortality, and the fragile balance between gods and humans. The mainstream fact is steady. Ancient texts connect human increase with divine unease. The problem begins as sound, not only literal sound, though the city is full of that. Donkeys bray near the gates, merchants argue over measures, workers call across canals, potters strike vessels to test their strength, children cry, laugh, and ask questions at exactly the wrong moment, which is their sacred duty. The sound becomes a symbol. Human life multiplies beyond easy control. More mouths require more grain, more houses require more bricks, more fields require more water, more labourers require more accounting. The divine solution to labour has become a dense, restless presence beneath the sky. Usefulness has become abundance. Abundance has become pressure. You walk through a marketplace where flies gather around fish laid on reeds. Dates gleam in baskets. Wool hangs from wooden frames. A woman sells onions with the calm authority of someone who knows she has what everyone needs. Two men debate the fairness of a weight stone, because civilization cannot resist becoming mathematical at inconvenient times. Every exchange creates relation. Every relation creates memory. Every memory creates expectation. The gods may hear this as noise, but from within the city, it is life arranging itself. People bargain, marry, mourn, borrow, repay, cheat, forgive, and begin again. The city is 1,000 private dramas stitched into one public hum. A quirky tradition in the wider Mesopotamian flood story says the gods cannot sleep because humanity becomes too loud. It is a strangely domestic image. Cosmic beings, rulers of heaven and earth, disturbed like irritated neighbours by the racket downstairs. And yet the image works. Noise means more than volume. It means independence. A silent creation stays manageable. A noisy creation has desires, disputes, festivals, tools, babies, lawsuits, songs, and opinions about barley prices. Noise means humans are not merely functioning, they are becoming a world. Perhaps that is the fear. Not that humans shout, but that they gather. There is an open scholarly debate about how to interpret the noise motif. Some researchers read it as a mythic way to speak about overpopulation and ecological strain. Others see social anxiety, elite discomfort, or theological reflection on human mortality. The debate remains alive because the symbol is rich, and ancient stories rarely explain themselves politely. The city keeps humming. You pass a canal where water reflects broken strips of sky. Men patch the bank with mud and reeds. A scribe checks a tablet against baskets of grain. Nearby, a girl repeats signs under her breath while carrying water, folding learning into labour. Nobody notices that this small act is quietly extraordinary. Knowledge is spreading, not evenly, not generously, but still spreading. Human potential thrives in density. In a village, a skill may remain with one family. In a city, skills meet. The brewer knows the potter knows the merchant knows the scribe knows the priest knows the palace. Every connection becomes a channel through which ideas travel. Canals move water, cities move thought. The gods in the stories may have wanted labourers, but labourers in cities become neighbours become networks become memory larger than any single life. A person dies, but the craft continues. A ruler falls, but the account system survives. A temple burns, but a hymn may be copied elsewhere. The human world becomes resilient. That resilience can look like disobedience from above. You enter a narrow street where shade cools the skin. The walls lean close, and the smell of cooking lentils mixes with damp plaster. Behind one doorway, an old man tells children a story about a king who thought too highly of himself. The children laugh softly, already learning that power can be made small through storytelling. That laughter matters. A people who can laugh at power are not fully possessed by it. They may still obey, they may still fear, they may still bow at the proper times, but somewhere inside, a space remains unruled. Noise includes laughter. Noise includes grief. Noise includes the whispered question nobody writes down. The city's growth also changes the gods themselves in human imagination. Deities become patrons of particular places. Their greatness is tied to temples, festivals, and political fortunes. When a city rises, its god's name rises. When a city falls, its god must be explained, defended, mourned, or reimagined. Humans do not only serve divine reputations, they help create them. That thought is unsettling. A god may command worship, yet worship shapes how the god is known. Hymns praise divine qualities in human language. Statues reveal divine presence through human craft. Rituals express cosmic order through human movement. The divine image passes through human interpretation again and again. The gods are vast. Their earthly memory is handmade. Perhaps this is why the swelling human world becomes threatening. The more people exist, the more versions of divine reality circulate. Farmers pray differently from kings. Mothers fear differently from soldiers. Scribes describe differently from singers. No single system can completely contain the living variety of human need. The noise is plural. It has many throats. At dusk, the city's sound changes. Day labour fades into evening gathering. Families return indoors. Animals settle. The temple musicians begin a measured song. Yet even then, the silence never becomes complete. Pots click. Infants stir. Lovers murmur. Someone coughs behind a wall. Someone prays without confidence. The gods still hear them, or perhaps the humans hope they do. The old mythic complaint about noise may hide a deeper recognition. Humanity has become impossible to ignore. The clay beings fill the land with activity, expectation, and memory. They disturb divine rest because they have become more than a workforce. They have become history in motion, and history is noisy. It tramples, sings, remembers, exaggerates, forgets, rebuilds, and complains about dinner. It refuses to stay within the neat boundary of original purpose. It grows like reeds after floodwater, dense and murmuring under the wide Mesopotamian sky. You pause at the city gate as night settles. Beyond the walls, the fields darken. Inside, lamps flicker one by one. The city looks fragile from a distance, a low cluster of flame and clay against endless shadow. Yet inside that fragility lives something difficult to silence. The gods may command storms, kings may seal orders, priests may guard rituals, but human voices keep multiplying in rooms no authority fully enters. The noise continues, softer now, woven into sleep. It is not rebellion yet. It is the sound of potential becoming collective, a murmur rising from kitchens, courtyards, workshops, and schoolrooms. A murmur that says humanity is no longer merely made. Humanity is becoming. Rain begins as a sound too soft to frighten anyone. It touches reed roofs, darkens dust, and beads along the edges of walls. At first, the city welcomes it. The air cools. Children lift their faces. Farmers look toward the fields and think of grain. Water is blessing before it becomes judgment. Then the rivers rise. Mesopotamian flood traditions preserve memories of overwhelming waters sent after divine anger or divine exhaustion. Scholars at Oxford, Yale, and the University of Pennsylvania have studied these stories beside geological and archaeological evidence for real floods in ancient river landscapes. The fact remains careful. Flooding shaped Mesopotamian life, and myth gave it cosmic meaning. The plain is made for water. That is both mercy and threat. You stand near a canal bank as the current thickens with silt. Branches spin past. A dead fish turns silver in the brown flow. Workers shout to one another, pressing mud into weak places, but their voices disappear beneath the rain. The sky lowers until the world feels sealed inside wet darkness. The river no longer obeys its lines. This is the terror beneath irrigation civilization. Humans cut channels, raise levees, plan fields, and measure flow. They make water useful. They persuade it, briefly, to behave. Yet a river remembers older freedoms. It can climb over human design and raise careful boundaries in one night. The flood is nature. The flood is also myth. In the old stories, flood becomes a divine answer to human excess. Humanity has become too loud, too numerous, too disruptive. The gods choose reduction, not correction, not conversation, not a strongly worded tablet from heaven. They choose water. Ancient solutions were not always subtle. The city shakes with storm. Roofs leak. Animals cry in pens. Mothers gather children near the highest corners of rooms. Clay walls soften, slump, and return toward the mud from which they came. A storage jar tips and spills grain into dirty water. Everything mixed, everything loosened. A quirky thread in later flood traditions tells of a chosen survivor warned in secret to build a vessel and preserve life. The detail has travelled through centuries because it carries such dreamlike tension. One person hears what the crowd does not. One household prepares while the world continues cooking dinner. That is haunting. It also suggests divine division. If all the gods wanted humanity gone, why warn anyone? If destruction was complete justice, why preserve seed, animals, skills, and memory? The flood story does not offer a clean divine will. It shows conflict within heaven itself. Some power destroys, some power preserves. There is an open scholarly debate about whether Mesopotamian flood myths reflect a single catastrophic event, repeated local floods, symbolic concerns about mortality, or theological reflection on population and order. Researchers remain cautious because archaeology gives layers of mud, while myth gives meaning. The two do not always match neatly. Still, the emotional truth is unmistakable. The world can end locally. For a city, one great flood is enough. Walls fall, fields vanish, graves open, tablets dissolve unless baked by accident. They live and climb rooftops and watch familiar streets become channels of brown water. A neighbour's doorway disappears. A temple courtyard fills like a pond. The gods have chosen water because water leaves little to argue with. Yet human potential survives precisely because it learns from disaster. A flood teaches elevation, storage, boat making, warning signs, memory, and fear. It teaches that a system built on control must also prepare for failure. It teaches that the future belongs partly to those who listen before the storm is obvious. The survivor is not only lucky, the survivor is attentive. You see him in the rain, this figure of hidden warning. He may be king, sage, priest, or ordinary man transformed by listening. He gathers wood, he seals seams, he brings animals and seeds. His neighbours perhaps laugh, or perhaps they are too busy with their own troubles to care. Humanity often ignores the strange builder until the water reaches the knees. Then laughter changes. The vessel rises around it. The plane disappears under rain. The old order sinks. Fields, courtyards, workshops, streets, and thresholds vanish beneath one moving skin of water. The world becomes horizonless, as if creation has been reversed. But inside the vessel, memory remains. This is the key. The flood may reduce humanity's noise, but it cannot erase human potential if knowledge is carried forward. Seeds preserve agriculture, animals preserve herds, tools preserve craft, stories preserve warning, names preserve identity, rituals preserve relationship with gods who have proven both necessary and dangerous. Destruction meets archive. The human being becomes a moving tablet. Perhaps this is what unsettles the gods most deeply. Humans can suffer near extinction and still transmit pattern. They can lose a city and rebuild another. They can bury their dead, dry the clay, repair the canal, and teach children what the water did. Fear does not end them. It educates them. Morning after flood has a particular silence. The rain has stopped. The air smells of rot, wet straw, and open earth. Mud clings to everything. Fish lie in places where children once played. A door floats past, turning slowly in a shallow pool. The world looks newly made, but not innocent. Survivors walk carefully. They count who remains. They search for tools. They find tablets half dissolved, jars cracked, walls leaning like tired old men. Someone begins to cry, not loudly, but with the exhausted sound of a body that has no strength left for ceremony. Then someone else begins to work. That is humanity's terrible gift. Work begins again. A broken bank must be repaired. Wet grain must be sorted. A hearth must be relit. A child must be fed. A story must be told, because without the telling, the disaster becomes only mud and loss. With the telling, it becomes memory, warning, and meaning. The flood against potential becomes the maker of deeper potential. It teaches humanity that the gods can be feared, but also questioned. Why create servants, then drown them? Why punish noise with silence? Why warn one household and abandon another? The myth does not settle these questions. It lets them drift like debris on dark water. Perhaps that is why the story survived. It is not simple comfort. It is a wound with a voice. You stand on the wet plain as sunlight breaks through cloud. Steam rises from the mud. Birds return cautiously to the reeds. The river still moves wide and brown, swollen with everything it has taken. Yet along its banks, human figures gather. Small figures. Persistent figures? Clay beings soaked in the water meant to end them. They lift baskets. They speak names. They mark the height of the flood on walls that still stand. They tell the children where the river came, how fast it rose, and what must never be forgotten. The gods may have sent water to quiet mankind, but water carried the story farther. And in the hush after disaster, human potential becomes something harder to destroy. Not loud now, not proud, only watchful, wounded, and learning how to survive the anger of heaven. The waters withdraw, but they do not take the silence with them. Silence remains in the streets. sitting where voices used to gather. It rests inside broken jars, under collapsed roofs, and across fields where silt covers the old furrows. The air smells of wet clay, bruised reeds, and smoke from the first careful fires. Survival begins with counting. Ancient Mesopotamian traditions often preserve a flood survivor who carries human life into a ruined world. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and the University of Pennsylvania have studied these accounts as part of a wider pattern of ancient Near Eastern memory, where catastrophe and wisdom travel together. The fact is steady. Flood stories preserve destruction, but also transmission. Something crosses the water. Not only bodies, knowledge crosses. You stand near a drying riverbank, where a small group gathers around salvaged tools. A bronze blade is cleaned with sand. A wooden pole is tested for cracks. A clay jar, miraculously whole, is lifted from mud as though it were a sacred animal. People speak softly, because loudness feels indecent among so much loss. A child asks where the city went. No one answers quickly. The survivor's task is not merely to breathe. Survival alone is animal endurance. Human survival requires memory organized into instruction. Where to build higher, which seeds to keep dry, how to read cloud, current, and smell. Which story must be told so the next generation does not mistake calm water for harmless water. The flood leaves teachers behind. In the old traditions, the survivor often receives favour, warning, or hidden knowledge from a divine source. That detail matters. It suggests that wisdom is not spread equally. It is guarded, given, whispered, or stolen from the edge of disaster. The human future depends on someone hearing what others do not. A quirky later Mesopotamian idea speaks of antediluvian sages, wise figures from before the flood who preserved knowledge across catastrophe. They hover at the edge of legend, neither ordinary men nor simple gods. Ancient imagination seems to enjoy placing librarians at the end of the world, which is sensible. Really, someone must save the instructions. Yet this survival of wisdom carries a troubling implication. If the gods wanted humanity reduced, why allow knowledge to endure? If the flood is punishment, why permit the punished to rebuild with better memory? Perhaps the divine world is divided. Perhaps one god fears humanity while another pities it. Perhaps destruction and preservation are two hands of the same ancient system. The tablets do not settle it. They let the question breathe. There is an open scholarly debate over whether the wise survivor should be read as a priestly ideal, a royal ancestor, a culture hero, or a mythic memory of disaster leadership. Researchers disagree because the figure changes across versions and languages. Still, the pattern remains clear enough to follow through the mist. After ruin, wisdom returns. You watch survivors make the first rough shelter. Reeds are tied. Mud is packed. A roof takes shape. Low and imperfect, but real. Nearby, a woman spreads damp grain in the sun, turning it with patient fingers. Every motion is practical, yet every motion also says no to annihilation. This is quiet defiance, not shouted, built. The gods may command vast forces, but humans answer with repetition. They stack bricks again, they dry seed again, they relight hearths again. The power seems small until you remember that civilizations are made almost entirely of repeated beginnings. A broken world does not rebuild itself. Hands do. The survivor carries secret knowledge, but also ordinary knowledge. How to soothe a frightened child. How to find drinkable water after flood. How to bury the dead without surrendering to despair. How to speak of gods when gods have become difficult to trust. That last knowledge is the hardest. A people who survive divine violence cannot return to innocence. Their prayers change. Their offerings may continue. But beneath them lies memory of abandonment. Gratitude becomes tangled with caution. Reverence remains, yet it is no longer simple. Humanity has learned that the heavens may be dangerous. Such knowledge cannot be unlearned. In a shaded place, an elder begins to speak. The listeners sit near him, knees drawn close, faces still marked by hunger and exhaustion. He tells of the warning, the waters, the vessel, the cries, the long waiting, and the first sight of land. His voice is rough, but the story steadies the group. Narrative becomes shelter. A wall protects the body. A story protects meaning. Without story, disaster scatters the mind. With story, terror receives shape. It can be carried, repeated, altered, and placed inside a pattern larger than one person's grief. This does not make the wound vanish. It makes the wound survivable. Perhaps the gods fear this most. Humans make meaning from what was meant to end them. They turn catastrophe into teaching. They turn punishment into tradition. They turn the memory of divine anger into a reason to become more watchful, more skilled, more organized, more difficult to erase. A flood can kill. It cannot guarantee forgetfulness. You walk across silt that cracks under the returning sun. Tiny green shoots already press through the mud. They look fragile, almost foolish, which is how beginnings often look. A bird lands on a leaning beam and shakes water from its wings, utterly uninterested in theology. Life resumes without asking permission. The survivor's secret knowledge may include rituals, measurements, names, warnings, or the proper way to restore sacred order. But beneath all of that lies a deeper secret. The world can be broken, and still the human mind can gather its pieces. This is more than endurance. It is reconstruction. Humans are not merely repeating what existed. They are rebuilding with the memory of loss inside the design. A wall raised after flood is not the same wall. A canal repaired after disaster carries the memory of overflow. A hymn sung after ruin trembles differently. Wisdom after catastrophe is never clean. It has mud under its nails. The old sages, whether priestly figures, culture heroes, or legendary teachers, represent this difficult gift. They are the idea that civilization must be carried through darkness by those who remember forms when forms collapse. They stand between drowned cities and future schools, between broken offerings and restored ritual. They are memory with feet. As evening falls, the first repaired hearth burns brighter. Smoke rises into a sky washed clear by storm. People gather close, eating little, speaking little, listening more than they did when the city was loud. Their faces are turned toward flame, not because flame explains everything, but because it helps the night feel less endless. The flood has changed them. They are smaller now, and greater. They know loss. They know fear. They know that divine order can turn against the living. Yet they also know how to begin again. And beginning again is a kind of knowledge no god can easily revoke. This secret crosses from mouth to mouth. Build higher. Store carefully. Listen closely. Remember, the ruined world darkens, but memory stays awake beside the fire. It enters children who did not understand the water. It enters songs that will soften the terror without removing it. It enters future tablets waiting somewhere in unshaped clay. And under the cleansed, indifferent stars, humanity keeps the knowledge it was not supposed to carry so far. At the edge of the dark water, figures appear where mist gathers over the reeds. They are not clearly gods, not merely men, and not comfortable enough to name with certainty. They belong to that older borderland where myth keeps its strangest teachers. The marsh is silver around them. Fish move beneath the surface. The air smells of wet plants, old mud, and morning cold. These are the ancient sages. Later Mesopotamian traditions describe 7 wise figures connected with early civilization, ritual knowledge, and the world before the flood. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, and major museum collections have studied them as part of Mesopotamia's deep memory of wisdom and kingship. The fact is careful but important. These sages became symbols of knowledge handed down from remote antiquity. They stand like memories given bodies. Some traditions link them with the deep waters, the hidden source of wisdom beneath the visible world. Later imagery sometimes gives them strange, fish-like forms, as though civilization itself crawled from the river wearing scales and secrets. It is odd. Yes, But the ancient world was never afraid of odd teachers. Honestly, modern universities have done worse. You imagine one sage stepping from the water at dawn. His robe clings darkly to him. His eyes are calm, not gentle, but patient. He carries no sword. He carries knowledge, which is often more disruptive. Behind him, the marsh opens and closes around his footsteps. He teaches. He teaches rites, measurements, signs, purification, building, and the proper arrangement of sacred life. He does not merely give tricks for survival. He gives pattern. He turns scattered human skill into tradition. What one person knows becomes what a city can inherit. A sage is a bridge. Not a bridge of stone. A bridge of memory. The idea of 7 sages is powerful because 7 feels complete in many ancient systems. It suggests a set, a structure, a finished order. A scattered world becomes easier to imagine when wisdom arrives in numbered form. The number gives the mystery a frame, but frames can also hide cracks. There's a scholarly debate over how far these sage traditions reach into older Sumerian religion. Some researchers see them as later priestly creations that connect learned experts with primeval authority. Others argue that they preserve deeper memories of culture heroes and ritual specialists. The evidence remains fragmentary, and the line between inheritance and invention stays beautifully inconvenient. Still, the sages reveal a hidden anxiety. If civilization needed teachers from beyond ordinary humanity, then human knowledge is both gift and intrusion. It does not grow only from the field. It arrives from the margin, from water, from beings who do not belong cleanly in the human village. Knowledge becomes slightly forbidden by nature. You feel that unease in the marsh. The reeds whisper against one another. A bird lifts suddenly and vanishes into pale sky. The water holds reflections that tremble with each ripple. It is easy to believe that something beneath the surface knows more than those who walk above it. The sages carry dangerous gifts. Agriculture can feed a city, but it can also support armies. Writing can preserve hymns, but it can also fix debts. Ritual can comfort a community, but it can also strengthen hierarchy. Measurement can build temples, but it can also divide land and people with cold precision. Knowledge never arrives alone. It brings consequences. Perhaps the gods feared human potential because humans did not invent every power slowly enough to remain harmless. In mythic imagination, wisdom descends, emerges, or is given. It arrives charged with authority from outside common life. Once received, it cannot be neatly returned. A taught species changes. A city taught by sages remembers beyond its own beginning. You see the first lessons unfolding. A cord is stretched across ground to mark a foundation. Clay is mixed for brick. A ritual bowl is washed carefully. A young learner repeats a sacred phrase until the rhythm enters his breath. Another watches stars and learns to connect sky patterns with earthly time. The ordinary world becomes legible. That is the deep transformation. Before teaching, events happen. After teaching, events can be interpreted: flood, eclipse, birth, illness, harvest, dream, and failure become signs within systems of meaning. This interpretive power lifts humanity beyond labour. It lets people ask what the world is saying. That question is dangerous to rulers. It may be dangerous to gods, because interpretation can wander from obedience. A priest may read a sign differently from a king. A scribe may preserve an older version of a myth that troubles a newer doctrine. A healer may know remedies outside temple authority. A diviner may warn that power is not favoured. Knowledge creates alternate centres. The sages are therefore not only teachers of civilization, they are reminders that wisdom can come from outside official control, from the deep, from the past, from beings remembered but not fully explained. Their presence unsettles the neat arrangement of divine command and human service. Who authorized the teachers? Who limited the lesson? Who decided how much humanity should know? The tablets do not answer in a single voice. They leave you by the water with questions drifting like reeds. The 7 sages remain half visible, entering later lists, priestly traditions, and royal claims. Kings and scholars could use them to anchor authority in unimaginable antiquity. If your knowledge comes from before the flood, it sounds impressive. Convenient, too, very convenient, yet beneath that convenience lies something moving. The claim to ancient wisdom means people believe true knowledge had roots deeper than present rule. No king invented it fully, no priest owned it absolutely. Wisdom belonged to a depth that even power had to approach with caution. The deep waters hold memory older than the throne. You walk along the marsh as daylight strengthens. Mud grips your sandals. Insects hum near your ear. The sage is gone now, or perhaps only harder to see. In his absence, the human learners remain with tools, phrases, measures, and rituals they did not possess before. The gift has entered the world. Nothing looks dramatic at first. A brick is still a brick. A chord is still a chord. A bowl is still a bowl. But each now belongs to a system, foundation, proportion, purity, offering, record, omen, calendar. The visible object carries invisible knowledge. This is how civilization becomes thick with meaning. A wall is not only shelter. A road is not only passage. A temple is not only brick. The sages teach people to see layers. Once humans see layers, they become difficult to confine to simple tasks. They no longer carry baskets without wondering about the design. They no longer watch the sky without searching for order. They no longer hear a myth without preserving its deeper pattern. The world becomes readable, and readers are never entirely obedient. As the sun climbs, the marsh begins to steam. The scent of water and green decay rises around you. Far away, a city is waking, ready to receive what the old teachers have placed into human hands. You sense the system forming again, but now with something more elusive inside it. Secret knowledge, numbered wisdom, a memory from before ordinary memory. Perhaps the gods feared not the strength of human bodies, but the arrival of teachers who made those bodies thoughtful. A labourer can be commanded. A skilled labourer can be directed. A taught and remembering people become something wider, stranger, and less predictable. The 7 sages fade into legend, yet their lesson remains awake. Civilization is not only built, it is initiated, and once the clay-born are initiated into pattern, they do not return to simple silence. The reed stylus enters clay, and a human thought becomes harder than breath. There is no thunder, no shining gate opens, only a hand, a tablet, and a quiet pressure applied at the correct angle. Yet something immense has happened. The mind has stepped outside the body and left a track behind. Writing changes everything. Cuneiform developed in ancient southern Mesopotamia from earlier systems of counting, sealing, and recording goods. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania have studied its growth from administration into literature, law, mathematics, ritual, and myth. The fact is steady. Writing began with practical needs, then expanded into cultural memory. Clay became a second human voice. You sit near a low table where tablets are drying in rows. The room smells of wet earth, reed fibre, lamp smoke, and the faint sourness of human concentration. A scribe presses sign after sign, steady as rain against a roof. He is not merely recording the world, he is training time to obey. A spoken order fades quickly. A written order waits. That waiting is power. A tablet can be carried across distance. It can be stored for years. It can accuse a debtor, preserve a hymn, confirm a boundary, or embarrass a dishonest official with admirable patience. Clay has no heartbeat, which makes it stubborn. A quirky detail from scribble life is that some tablets survived because fires accidentally baked them. Destruction, with its usual lack of manners, sometimes became preservation. A burning archive could become a library for the future, which is almost rude of history. But the deeper transformation is not accidental. Writing lets human beings outlast their immediate world. Kings die, but their inscriptions continue speaking. Temples collapse, but their rituals may be copied. Teachers vanish, but their exercises remain. Even a complaint, pressed into clay by someone tired and annoyed, can reach minds thousands of years later. The dead gain a strange endurance. The gods, too, become entangled in writing. Their names are listed, praised, invoked, arranged, and transmitted. Myths about them are copied in schools and libraries. Rituals for them become sequences of signs. Divine memory passes through human systems of storage and instruction. That may be the quietest danger of all. A god known only by living worship can fade when worshippers vanish. A god written into clay gains another form of survival. Yet that survival depends on humans. It depends on scribes, teachers, collections, copies, language, and readers willing to open old signs. The divine becomes archived. There is an open scholarly debate about whether writing mainly strengthened institutions or gradually expanded human reflection. Some researchers emphasize administration, control, and elite record keeping. Others point to literature, wisdom texts, letters, and prayers as signs of growing inner expression. The debate remains careful, because the earliest records are practical, while later tablets reveal wider human thought. Both truths can stand together. Writing can serve power. Writing can also outlive power. You watch a scribe copy an older myth. He does not invent the story, yet he changes it by preserving one version rather than another. A line breaks. A word is uncertain. He chooses. His choice may guide future listeners who will never know his name. Anonymous hands shape eternity. That is unsettling. The tablet is small, but it changes the scale of human action. Without writing, memory depends on living chains. With writing, memory can sleep unattended. It can wait beneath a floor, inside a jar, behind a collapsed wall, or under desert dust until another age finds it. Time becomes less absolute. For humans made of fragile flesh, this is almost unfairly clever. You may die, but your account remains. Your prayer remains. Your story remains. Your school tablet, tragically full of errors, may remain. Mortality loses its clean victory. The body returns to dust. The sign remains. Perhaps this is what gods might fear in the mythic imagination. Not human immortality in the divine sense, but human refusal to disappear properly. A species born to labour discovers a way to continue speaking after death. It does not defeat death. It complicates it. And complications are where history begins. You walk through an archive chamber. Shelves hold tablets like sleeping animals. Some are round and small. Others are long, flat, and crowded with signs. Tags identify groups of texts. A keeper knows where certain tablets belong. Order reigns, or at least makes a brave attempt. The archive is a human underworld. Voices descend into it. Voices return from it. Each tablet is both object and absence. The hand that shaped it is gone. The mouth that dictated it is gone. The room where it mattered may be gone. Yet the sign remains available to sight, touch, and interpretation. It asks the future to participate. Writing creates future readers. That alone changes humanity's role in the cosmos. A worker serves today. A writer addresses tomorrow. A reader brings yesterday into the present. Through writing, human beings stretch across time, forming a community that no king can assemble in one courtyard. This is not just memory, it is continuity. In the temple, writing stabilizes ritual. In the palace, it strengthens administration. In the school, it disciplines young minds. In myth, it lets old divine stories survive political change. In law, it turns judgment into precedent. In literature, it gives sorrow a durable shape. The sign touches everything, yet writing is never neutral. The one who records may select, simplify, flatter, or hide. The archive may preserve the powerful more often than the poor. A king's victory may be inscribed while the grief of conquered families passes into silence. Clay remembers, but not equally. Even memory has politics. The scribes know this. Perhaps. They may not say it aloud. They sit with tablets, tools, and the delicate authority of those who turn events into records. Their work looks quiet, but quiet work often builds the longest shadows. A ruler commands, a scribe preserves the command. A later reader judges them both. This is why writing becomes spiritually dangerous. It allows comparison across time. A hymn can be set beside a lament. A royal claim can be measured against ruin. A divine promise can be remembered after disaster. Human beings gain the ability to ask whether the world has kept its own words. That question is powerful. Outside. Evening deepens. The archive room grows cooler. A lamp flickers, and shadows fill the wedge marks. The tablets look still, but they are full of motion. Grain moves. Gods speak. Kings boast. Cities fall. Students learn. Survivors remember. All of it waits in clay. You sense that writing has turned humanity into something wider than the gods intended. Not louder, necessarily. Not stronger in the simple way. Wider. A creature that can occupy past, present, and imagined future through signs. The gods possess eternity. Humans create records. The difference remains vast, yet the gap has narrowed in a strange direction. Eternity may belong to heaven, but history now belongs partly to clay-born hands. The gods can be invoked, described, questioned, praised, and preserved by beings who are supposed to carry burdens. The stylus presses one final sign. The scribe lifts his hand. The tablet remains cooling in the dusk. A thought has been made durable. A voice has found a place to wait, and somewhere inside that waiting, human potential becomes harder to silence. A prayer begins in the dark, not with confidence, but with need. You hear it from a small room where a lamp burns low beside a clay wall. The flame trembles whenever night air slips through the reed door. A person sits near the light, hands folded, face turned toward a god who may be listening, or may be silent. This is where humanity becomes spiritually dangerous. Ancient Mesopotamian tablets preserve prayers, laments, hymns, wisdom writings, and personal appeals to divine powers. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania have studied these texts as evidence for religious imagination and human vulnerability. The fact is clear. People did not only obey gods, they spoke back to them. Not rudely, usually, carefully, fearfully, but still they spoke. The words ask for healing, justice, protection, forgiveness, explanation, or restored favour. Sometimes they praise a god's greatness. Sometimes they confess confusion. Sometimes they admit that suffering has arrived without an obvious cause. A human voice stands before divine power and tries to make pain understandable. That attempt changes everything. A servant can carry bread to a temple without questioning the divine order. A worshipper who asks why misfortune has come is doing something more complex. They are treating the universe as something that should answer. They are assuming that suffering has meaning, even when meaning hides. The question itself becomes a threshold. You sit close enough to smell the lamp oil and warm clay. Outside, dogs bark at something unseen. Inside, the person whispers words learned from tradition, yet the fear beneath them is personal. The prayer may be copied from a scribal model, but the ache is real. A formula holds a human wound. That is one of the great secrets of ritual language. It repeats old phrases, but each suffering person fills them with new breath. The same plea can belong to a merchant, a mother, a soldier, a widow, or a frightened official whose accounts have become suspiciously creative. The gods hear many versions of need. A quirky Mesopotamian practice involved rituals against unknown sins, where a person might suffer and not know which divine rule had been broken. Imagine apologizing to the entire invisible universe. just in case. It sounds excessive. Yet many modern people have felt that same nervous energy before opening an important letter. The ancient fear is familiar. What did I do? Who did I offend? Why has this happened? These questions are not rebellion in a loud sense. They are more intimate than rebellion. They place moral pressure upon the divine relationship. If humans suffer, they seek cause. If they seek cause, they examine gods, fate, ritual, society, and themselves. Inquiry grows from pain. There is an open scholarly debate about how to interpret personal piety in Mesopotamia. Some researchers emphasize temple-based religion and communal ritual. Others argue that prayers and letters to gods reveal deeply personal forms of devotion and anxiety. The evidence is uneven, yet the emotional force of the text is difficult to miss. Humans wanted answers, not always grand answers, sometimes only enough answer to sleep. You walk through a temple courtyard at night. The daytime officials are gone. The stones release stored heat into the dark. Incense hangs in the air like a tired memory. Somewhere within the sanctuary, the god's image rests unseen, surrounded by offerings and ritual silence. A person waits outside. They cannot enter the inner chamber. They cannot force the god to respond. They cannot see the divine face directly, yet they can speak. They can complain in acceptable language. They can ask for mercy. They can remind the god of past devotion. This is a quiet form of negotiation. The human voice becomes persistent. Perhaps the gods feared this persistence. Not because every prayer challenges them, but because prayer teaches humans to address power directly. It creates a relationship in which obedience is not mute. The worshipper can become petitioner, witness, defendant, accuser, and beloved servant all at once. That is a complicated creature. A tool does not ask whether its master is just. A human does, in laments over ruined cities. Divine absence becomes almost unbearable. The people describe abandoned temples, broken streets, scattered families, and gods who have departed from their houses. These laments do not reject divinity. They mourn its withdrawal, yet mourning can contain accusation, softened by grief. Where were you? Why did you leave? Will you return? The questions may be wrapped in poetry, but they still breathe. This is human potential entering theology. Once people can imagine divine justice, they can notice divine mystery. Once they can praise divine wisdom, they can also suffer under divine silence. The mind that worships deeply may also doubt deeply, because both acts require seriousness. Faith and questioning are not enemies here. They are neighbours in the same dark room. You feel the cool floor beneath your knees. The lamp flame lowers. The prayer continues. Slower now. It asks that anger be turned away, that the god remember kindness, that the sufferer be restored to health and standing. The voice does not demand. It pleads. Yet pleading is not nothing. It assumes the powerful can be moved. The idea that gods can be moved by human words is astonishing. Offerings may feed the temple system, but words seek the divine interior. They reach toward feeling, attention, memory, and favour. They imagine that heaven has an ear, and if heaven has an ear, humanity has a voice worth hearing. That thought sits quietly at the centre of the old tablets. The gods may rule, but humans interpret their rule through prayer. They decide which divine names to call. They shape suffering into speech. They transmit approved phrases, but also attach private fear to them. They keep asking generation after generation, until the divine world becomes filled with human address. The heavens become crowded with petitions. No wonder silence grows heavy. A god who never answers may still be feared, but a god repeatedly questioned becomes part of an ongoing human drama. The relationship is no longer simple command and service. It becomes expectation, disappointment, gratitude, bargaining, confession, and memory. The Claiborne have learned devotion with depth. Depth is hard to govern. At the edge of sleep, the person near the lamp finishes the prayer. The room does not change. No thunder rolls, no statue speaks, the wall remains clay, the night remains night. Yet something has happened inside the speaker. Pain has been placed into words, fear has been given shape, loneliness has been sent toward the unseen. That act may be small, but it reveals the vastness within human beings. They can suffer and still speak beautifully. They can fear and still search for justice. They can bow and still ask why the world cuts so deeply. Perhaps divine fear is not fear of human violence. Perhaps it is fear of human interior life, because once humans possess an inner world, they cannot be fully owned by any outer system. Temples may guide ritual, kings may command bodies, gods may receive offerings. Yet within the human heart, questions continue moving. Soft as smoke under a closed door, the prayer fades, the lamp goes out. In the darkness, the unanswered question remains awake. The fear of the gods may not be fear as humans usually imagine it. It may not be trembling, panic, or the sudden wish to hide behind clouds. It may be something colder and older, a divine awareness that creation has exceeded its first design, a quiet anxiety that the shaped thing now carries its own direction. That kind of fear has patience. Mesopotamian myths often show gods as powerful, but not emotionally simple. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania have studied divine assemblies, disputes, decisions, and regrets preserved in ancient tablets. The fact is steady. Mesopotamian gods could disagree, hesitate, complain, and change course. Power did not erase unease. You stand beneath a night sky where stars sharpen over the plain. The city below is dim, breathing through courtyards, alleys, and half-closed doors. Somewhere, a priest tends embers. Somewhere, a mother turns in sleep. Somewhere, a scribe dreams of signs that refuse to stay in order. The gods, in these stories, look down upon a restless creation. What do they see? They see workers who became builders, builders who became planners, planners who became writers, writers who became keepers of divine names. People made for service now carry memory, grief, skill, politics, interpretation, laughter, and prayer. Not a rebellion, something more subtle. Independence, a quirky idea sometimes found around Mesopotamian tradition, is that humans could trouble the gods simply by becoming too numerous and active, not by storming heaven with ladders, which would be inconvenient engineering, but by making life below impossible to ignore. The cosmic complaint sounds almost like a tired landlord hearing too many tenants, yet beneath the humour lies a deep pattern. The gods want order. Humans create variation. The gods assign roles. Humans develop identities. The gods demand offerings. Humans attach meanings, requests, doubts, and memories to those offerings. Every divine structure becomes more complex once humans live inside it. A system meant for obedience becomes a system of relationship. Relationship is never fully controllable. There is an open scholarly debate about whether divine fear in these stories should be read literally, symbolically, socially, or theologically. Some researchers see it as mythic language for population pressure and labour control. Others see a meditation on mortality, noise, and the limits of divine planning. The strongest readings allow many layers to stand together. The tablets are not narrow. They are deep. You walk along a canal under moonlight. The water is black and slow. Frogs call from the reeds. The mud smells cool after the heat of day. A thin wind moves across the fields, carrying the faint scent of smoke and cattle. Everything seems calm, but calm has never meant stillness. Beneath the surface, water shifts. Beneath the city, foundations settle. Beneath ritual, questions gather. Beneath obedience, interpretation grows. This is the old pattern of human potential. It rarely begins with a shout. It begins as awareness. Awareness changes the servant. A servant who believes only in command obeys simply. A servant who understands the master's need obeys differently. He sees the dependence hidden in authority. He sees the hunger behind the command, the fragility behind the ceremony, the labour beneath the sacred image. He may still bow, but he no longer bows blindly. Perhaps divine unease begins at that difference. The gods do not need to fear human strength. Flood, drought, disease, and war can break bodies easily enough. What they may fear is the human ability to learn from being broken. A defeated people can remember. A silenced person can teach a child. A ruined city can become a lament. Destruction cannot fully command meaning. That is the problem. You pause beside a low wall where moonlight touches the bricks. Each brick is marked by fingers long dead. The wall looks ordinary, but it is an argument against disappearance. Someone shaped clay, dried it, lifted it, set it into place, and trusted that another day might come. Human beings build because they believe in continuance, even when they know death waits. This mixture of mortality and future thinking may be the sharpest human power. Gods, imagined as enduring beings, do not need to plan against their own vanishing in the same way. Humans do. They plant trees they may not sit beneath. They train children to remember skills. They press signs into clay for readers unborn. The short-lived creature thinks long. That is magnificent. That is troubling. If you were an immortal god, perhaps a mortal creature with long memory would seem uncanny. It dies, but its words remain. It suffers, but its songs deepen. It is weak, but its systems persist. Each individual fades, yet humanity continues as a relay of hands. The gods may see clay, but clay has become succession. The fear, then, is not that one human will overpower heaven. It is that humanity as a whole becomes a second kind of permanence, not eternal like the gods, but enduring through renewal, children replacing parents, students copying teachers, cities rebuilding over ruin, stories surviving translation, conquest, and ash. A fragile immortality, very inconvenient for anyone hoping for quiet. You sense that the old myths are not merely about gods controlling humans. They're about control itself becoming uncertain. Divine plans produce unintended consequences. Human tools become traditions. Traditions become institutions. Institutions become memory. Memory becomes a mirror held up to power, and power dislikes mirrors. The divine fear may also be love's shadow. A maker can fear what a creation will suffer. A ruler can fear what subjects might become. A parent can fear a child's independence, even while knowing independence is the point. The myths do not say this plainly, but their emotional world allows such complexity. Perhaps the gods fear losing control. Perhaps they fear being forgotten. Perhaps they fear being understood. That last possibility is the quietest. To be worshipped from afar is one thing. To be observed through centuries of stories is another. Humans notice divine inconsistency. They remember divine anger. They preserve divine mercy. They compare one tale with another. They ask why a god destroys in one tradition and rescues in another. The gods become characters in human memory. Power becomes narrative. Narrative can soften power, question it, or carry it beyond its original shrine. The night deepens. The city sleeps in layers. Animals shift in pens. A watchman clears his throat. A lamp burns late in a scribe's room, where one more tablet waits to be finished. The stylus rests beside it like a small sleeping blade. You understand now that fear has changed shape. It is no longer the simple terror of gods toward human strength. It is the tension between makers and meanings, between authority and memory, between command and the living minds that receive command. Humans are not dangerous because they are large. They are dangerous because they are unfinished. They keep becoming. The moon slides behind a veil of cloud. For a moment, the temple roof disappears into darkness. Then it returns, pale and silent. The gods remain above the city, but the city dreams below them in countless private worlds. Each dream is beyond command. Each memory is a small hidden fire. And perhaps, in the oldest clay, Divine fear is only this recognition. The beings made to serve have become beings who remember, interpret, and choose. They still kneel, they still offer bread, they still fear the storm, but somewhere inside them, a door has opened. A broken tablet is sometimes more powerful than a complete one. You hold it carefully, because the missing part seems to pull at the mind. One edge has crumbled into powder, another is cut by an old fracture, pale and dry. The signs stop in the middle of a thought, and the silence after them feels intentional, though it is only damage. History often arrives with its mouth partly closed. Archaeologists and museum scholars at Yale, Oxford, Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania have catalogued thousands of Mesopotamian tablets, yet many remain fragmentary, displaced, or difficult to restore. The fact is plain and humbling. The ancient record is vast, but never whole. That incompleteness matters. You stand inside a storage room where tablets rest in trays beneath careful labels. Some are smooth and readable. Others are little more than corners, flakes, or lumps marked by a few surviving wedges. A single sign might preserve a god's name. A half line might suggest a lost ritual. A crack might remove the answer everyone wants. Very considerate of time, naturally. The missing lines create temptation. A mind wants to fill gaps. It wants the sentence completed, the motive exposed, the hidden system revealed. Yet the clay resists. It offers just enough to invite wonder, not enough to surrender certainty. This is where scholarship must move slowly. A mainstream fact remains essential. Many Mesopotamian literary works survive in later copies, often from scribble schools and libraries rather than from the moment of first composition. Scholars compare versions, study language, examine sign forms, and reconstruct broken passages with caution. The result is not fantasy. It is disciplined listening through damage. Still, discipline does not remove mystery. You look at one fragment and imagine what has vanished. Perhaps the missing section explained why a god warned a human survivor. Perhaps it named a forgotten teacher. Perhaps it described the first fear of heaven toward human growth. Or perhaps it listed barley, because history enjoys disappointing dramatic people. The uncertainty is honest, and honesty is its own depth. A quirky reality of tablet preservation is that some of the most ordinary records survive better than grand stories. A receipt for goats may outlive a myth of creation. A schoolboy's exercise may remain while a temple hymn disappears. The ancient world has a strange sense of priorities, or perhaps clay simply has no taste. But even ordinary records deepen the mystery. A rationalist shows labour. A land survey shows boundaries. A legal dispute shows conflict. A school exercise shows training. These humble texts reveal the human systems beneath the myths. They show that the world of gods and floods was also a world of wages, fields, mistakes, and obligations. And the divine story rests on human paperwork. There is an open scholarly debate about how far modern reconstructions can go when dealing with missing texts. Some researchers confidently restore patterns from parallel versions. Others warn that gaps can hide unexpected differences. Both caution and imagination are necessary, but neither should pretend to be final. The broken tablet teaches restraint. It also teaches longing. You trace the edge of the fragment without touching the signs. The clay is rough near the break, smoother where the scribe once shaped it. A whole hand moved here. A whole mind followed a tradition here. A whole world stood behind these marks, and yet only a piece has reached you. A fragment is survival and loss at once. That dual nature mirrors the human story. People endure, but never completely. Cities survive through names, but not through voices in full. Gods survive through hymns, but not through every ritual gesture. Kings survive through inscriptions, but not through the private fear behind their eyes. The past is not a temple you enter. It is a ruin you listen to. In that ruin, divine fear becomes harder to define. The tablets do not hand you a signed confession from the gods. They give scattered scenes, human creation, divine labour, human noise, flood, survival, wisdom, writing, prayer. Each piece suggests a larger pattern, but the pattern remains partly hidden. Perhaps that is why it still grips the mind. Certainty ends a story too quickly. Mystery lets it breathe. You move through the archive as dust turns gold in the late light. A curator lifts a small fragment from its tray and studies the sign sequence. Nearby, a photograph shows another piece held in a museum across the sea. Sometimes fragments of one tablet are separated by continents, as if history itself has been scattered like grain. Reconstruction becomes a quiet act of reunion. One piece may sit in London, another may rest in Philadelphia, another may remain unrecognised in a drawer. To bring them together is to let an ancient sentence inhale again. Yet even when pieces join, cracks remain. The restored tablet carries scars, visible reminders that knowledge is patched, not pure. That should make us gentler with the past. It should also make us more alert. Because gaps are where fantasy often enters wearing confident shoes. People may claim the tablets reveal everything clearly, that gods feared human power in one exact way, that every mystery has been solved by one dramatic phrase. The clay itself says otherwise. The clay says, wait, read carefully, leave room for shadow. This does not make the story weaker, it makes it more human. Ancient people lived with uncertainty too. They did not possess clean answers about suffering, divine anger, disaster, or destiny. Their myths speak from within uncertainty, not above it. The broken tablet is therefore appropriate. It gives us a past shaped like memory itself. You hear the soft sound of a brush moving over clay. It is almost like breathing. Outside. Rain begins lightly against the roof of the modern room, echoing older storms across older plains. The tablet sits between worlds, neither fully dead nor fully alive. Its missing lines continue working. They force questions to remain open. Why create humans with enough intelligence to worry heaven? Why preserve wisdom after flood? Why allow writing to hold divine names? Why permit prayers that ask the gods to justify pain? No single fragment answers. Together they form an unease. A scholar may call it mythic tension. A storyteller may call it hidden truth. A tired listener near sleep may simply feel that the ancient world understood something modern. People still avoid. Power is never secure once memory exists. The fragment does not need to shout this. Its brokenness says enough. As night settles, the archive lights dim. The tablets return to trays, boxes, shelves, and careful silence. The fragment you held seems small again, almost harmless. Yet it has opened a doorway into absence, and absence can be wide. You leave with no final line, only edges, only marks, only the sense that something important was said, damaged, copied, lost, and partly found again. The gods remain half hidden in clay. Humanity remains half revealed by its own records. Between them lies a field of missing signs, where the oldest questions continue to wait, and the gaps do not close. The old story does not remain beside one river forever. It travels. You feel it moving through trade roads, temple schools, caravan dust, royal courts, and the patient hands of scribes. A tale born among canals can pass into another tongue, put on new garments, and still carry the same hidden bones: creation, burden, flood, wisdom, and guarded knowledge begin to echo across lands. Ancient Near Eastern studies confirm that Mesopotamian myths influenced later literary and religious traditions. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania have compared flood stories, creation patterns, king lists, and wisdom traditions across languages and centuries. The fact is careful but strong. Ideas moved through the ancient world. They did not stay politely at home. A story crosses a border and changes its accent. A divine assembly becomes another council. A flood survivor receives another name. Sacred knowledge is carried by another sage, another priest, another family line. The shape remains familiar, yet the surface shifts like water under moonlight. This is how myth survives, not by staying frozen, by becoming useful again. You walk along a road where merchants lead donkeys heavy with textiles, tin, wood, and stories. They carry goods, but also jokes, rumours, omens, songs, and frightening tales told near fires when the wind grows cold. No official archive can control everything that travels by mouth. The road is an archive too. It has dust instead of shelves. A quirky detail of ancient transmission is that scribes often copied older stories in school settings, sometimes preserving traditions from lands already politically changed or conquered. Empires could fall, but their homework might continue. History, with perfect irony, sometimes survives because students needed practice material. So myths wander. They enter Akkadian versions. They appear in royal libraries. They mingle with local theology. They inspire later comparisons with stories of great floods, chosen survivors, divine displeasure, and human renewal. Each version becomes a witness, not to a single simple event, but to a deep human pattern. The pattern is older than any one tablet. Humans sense that they were shaped by powers beyond themselves. They sense that knowledge is precious, risky, and not evenly given. They remember that water can erase cities. They imagine that survival depends on listening, building, preserving, and teaching. These ideas travel because they remain useful. There is an open scholarly debate over how direct these influences are in every case. Some researchers argue for clear lines of transmission between Mesopotamian and later traditions. Others caution that similar stories may also arise from shared human experience with floods, kings, labour, and mortality. The debate continues because influence can be real without being simple. Echoes are not always copies, sometimes they are conversations. You enter another ancient city far from the earlier Sumerian marshes. The streets differ, the language differs, the gods wear different names, yet the same unease breathes beneath the surface. Humans are made, warned, judged, spared, taught, and watched. The old structure returns. A higher power limits humanity. A hidden gift expands humanity. A disaster interrupts humanity. A survivor carries humanity forward. The sequence feels almost ritual. It appears because societies everywhere face similar fears. What happens when people grow beyond control? What happens when knowledge spreads too widely? What happens when divine order and human desire pull against each other? The Sumerian clay gives one early form to this tension. Later worlds keep reshaping it. In one place, the fear may focus on forbidden wisdom. In another, on human pride. In another, on divine jealousy or moral corruption. In another, on the terrible noise of living beings who refuse to remain small. The names change, but the pulse remains. Human potential disturbs the sky. That idea is not only Mesopotamian, it becomes almost universal. People tell stories in which heaven gives, withholds, punishes, warns, or negotiates with mortals who are growing clever. Fire is stolen, trees are guarded, towers rise, secrets are taught, floods come, survivors begin again. Different myths, shared anxiety. You pause near a later library where tablets lie arranged under royal protection. A ruler gathers old knowledge not merely to admire it, but to possess it. The act itself is revealing. Power wants the past close. It wants ancient wisdom catalogued, named, controlled, and displayed. But libraries are dangerous pets. They preserve more than rulers intend. A royal collection may store hymns that glorify kings, but also stories that show gods quarrelling, cities falling, and humans surviving divine plans. An archive built to strengthen authority can quietly preserve the memory of authority's limits. The tablets do not always flatter their owners. That is another echo. Human potential does not only challenge gods through invention, it challenges power through preservation. A story can leave one city and become impossible to erase. Once copied into many hands, it no longer belongs entirely to its first temple, first ruler, or first language. Memory migrates. Migrating memory is hard to capture. The road grows dark. A caravan stops beside a dry stream bed. Fires are lit. Bread is warmed against flat stones. Someone begins to tell a flood story, not exactly as a scribe would write it, but with enough familiar shape to make listeners lean closer. A child hears it. The child will retell it differently. That difference is not failure, it is life. Oral memory bends toward the needs of each audience. Written memory steadies the bend, but never eliminates change. Between mouth and tablet, the ancient story becomes both stable and alive. Perhaps the gods feared this too. A command can be issued once. A story can escape. It can pass into another household, another kingdom, another religion, another century. It can survive conquest by becoming part of the conqueror's imagination. It can hide inside teaching, ritual, poetry, and warning. The gods may rule places. Stories cross them. You feel the echoes moving beyond Sumer, through Akkadian, Babylonian, Assyrian, and later worlds. The flood survivor changes name. The divine council changes tone. The hidden knowledge changes costume. Yet again and again, humanity stands in the same unsettling place. Created, but not simple. Limited, but not empty. Punished, but not erased. The pattern reveals a deep human recognition. We inherit powers we do not fully understand. We build systems that grow beyond our control. We fear knowledge, yet cannot stop seeking it. We imagine gods guarding boundaries because we know boundaries are fragile. The ancient stories are mirrors. They are also warnings. At dawn, the caravan moves again. Hooves press prints into dust. The storyteller's voice fades. But the tale travels in those who heard it. Somewhere ahead, another city waits with its own gods, its own fears, its own scribes ready to make old words new. The echo continues, not as proof of one simple secret, but as evidence of a human question older than most nations. Why does heaven guard knowledge from earth? Why do mortals keep receiving it anyway? Why does destruction fail to end the story? The tablets from Sumer stand near the beginning of that long corridor. They do not close it, they open it, and as the tale moves from land to land, the divine fear becomes larger than one myth. It becomes the fear that human beings, once taught to remember, will carry every forbidden pattern farther than intended. Across rivers, across tongues, across time, the human flame does not look like fire at first. It looks like a hand smoothing clay. It looks like a child repeating signs under a teacher's stare. It looks like a worker repairing a canal wall while muttering at the river. It looks like bread cooling beside a hearth, offered first to powers beyond reach. Potential often hides in ordinary gestures. Ancient Mesopotamian records show people organizing labor, preserving law, composing hymns, studying omens, practicing medicine, and calculating movement in the heavens. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania have explored how these achievements shaped early civilization. The fact is steady. Human skill in Mesopotamia became systematic, durable, and astonishingly layered. That is the flame, not a blaze, a persistence. You walk through a city waking under pale morning light. The first sounds are small. A doorbar lifts. A jar scrapes against the floor. A woman coughs, then begins grinding grain. A scribe opens a basket of tablets. Somewhere, a priest washes his hands before ritual. Nothing seems world-changing, yet every act continues the long human refusal to remain only what was assigned. A worker becomes a craftsman becomes a teacher becomes a tradition becomes a memory strong enough to survive kings. The flame passes from hand to hand. A quirky detail from Mesopotamian intellectual life is the deep seriousness given to omens. Liver shapes, dreams, stars, animal births, and strange events could all be read as signs. The universe, apparently, was sending messages with questionable handwriting. Still, the ambition behind it is remarkable. Humans wanted the world to be readable. They were not content to suffer events blindly. They watched, compared, recorded, and interpreted. They looked for pattern in weather, illness, politics, and stars. Even when their conclusions seem strange now, the impulse is familiar and profound. Make the unknown speak. That desire may be the brightest part of human potential. It is not enough to live. Humans want meaning. It is not enough to eat. They ask why harvest fails. It is not enough to fear heaven. They ask what heaven intends. Questions are small flames. Together they become dawn. There is an open scholarly debate about how Mesopotamian science, divination, and religion should be understood together. Some researchers separate practical observation from ritual interpretation. Others argue that ancient knowledge formed one woven fabric, where sky-watching, medicine, mathematics, and theology shared the same search for order. The old world did not divide truth neatly. It gathered signs. You stand beside an astronomer priest on a roof at night. The bricks are cool beneath your feet. The sky is clear and deep, filled with stars sharp as grain scattered across black cloth. He watches carefully, not with idle wonder, but with disciplined attention. The heavens are being studied, not conquered. Studied. This matters because observation changes the observer. To watch the sky night after night is to learn patience, recurrence, and scale. The stars make human life seem brief, yet human record-keeping makes the sky's rhythm enter clay. A mortal life becomes part of a longer calculation. The flame reaches upward, not to burn heaven, but to understand it. Perhaps the gods feared this gentler ascent more than violence. A sword can be broken, a wall can be flooded, but the habit of attention returns in every generation. One person teaches another where to look, what to record, and how to compare. Knowledge becomes inheritance. Inheritance becomes freedom of a kind. You pass a healer's room where herbs hang from cords. The air smells of crushed plants, wool, smoke, and warm skin. A sick man lies on a mat while a practitioner recites words and prepares a remedy. Ritual and medicine sit together, neither embarrassed by the other. The human flame burns here too. Pain is being answered, not always successfully. Ancient healing had limits, and suffering was vast. Yet the act of trying is immense. Humans do not accept helplessness easily. They experiment, pray, observe, repeat, and remember what seemed to help. Compassion becomes technique. Technique becomes tradition. Tradition becomes hope. That hope is dangerous to despair, and perhaps to any order that relies on human smallness. When people learn that some suffering can be treated, some disasters can be prepared for, some decisions can be recorded, and some rulers can be remembered honestly, they change their posture toward existence. They remain vulnerable, but less passive. You move through workshops where fire glows in clay furnaces. Metal softens under heat, pottery hardens, wool becomes cloth, reeds become baskets, stone becomes seal. Each craft is a conversation with matter. The artisan does not command the material blindly. He listens to its limits. This is wisdom through touch. Human potential is not only abstract thought, it lives in muscle memory, skilled pressure, trained sight, and patient correction. A maker learns failure intimately. Too much heat cracks the vessel, too little ruins the metal. A crooked line changes the seal. The world teaches through resistance. Humans learn because things refuse them. The gods may have assigned work, but work revealed reality. Every material has secrets. Every task has hidden laws. The more humans serve the world through labour, the more the world teaches them how it is made. This is the irony at the centre of the clay. Service becomes apprenticeship. Apprenticeship becomes mastery. Mastery becomes imagination. By evening, the city glows with small fires. Lamps shine behind reed screens. A song rises from one house, then another. Someone tells a story about an ancient king. Someone argues about an account. Someone comforts a child afraid of thunder. The flame is everywhere, divided and undiminished. No single person contains it. No temple owns it fully. No palace commands it completely. It survives in craft, speech, tenderness, doubt, record, memory, and adaptation. It is quiet enough to miss, yet strong enough to carry civilization across centuries. Perhaps this is why the divine fear never needs to be loud. The gods do not face one mighty enemy, they face accumulation. Little skills become systems, small memories become archives, private questions become prayers, local stories become traditions that cross rivers and empires. The human flame spreads by being shared. It does not require permission. You pause at the edge of the city, where the fields stretch dark and flat beneath the stars. The temple rises behind you. The river moves ahead, carrying moonlight in broken strips. Somewhere beyond sight, another settlement burns with its own lamps, its own voices, its own stubborn hopes. Clay-born beings are still fragile. Flood can take them. War can scatter them. Hunger can bend them low. Yet the flame returns wherever hands begin again. A sign pressed into clay, a wall lifted from mud, a seed saved in a jar, a story told so a child will not forget. The old systems may try to contain humanity within service, fear, and ritual, but the flame moves inward. It teaches people to remember themselves as more than tools. It does not make them gods. It makes them difficult to reduce. That is enough. The night deepens, and the city becomes a constellation of human persistence. Small lights, small voices, small lives. Together, they form something no divine plan can fully measure. The clay carries fire now, and fire, once carried, seeks another hand. The final tablet does not close the story. It rests in your hand like something unfinished by design. Its edges are worn. Its signs hold light in narrow shadows. The clay feels small, yet behind it stand cities, rivers, gods, workers, kings, children, mourners, teachers, and all those quiet hands that made memory durable. Ancient Sumer did not leave one simple doctrine about why gods might fear human potential. Scholars at Yale, Oxford, Chicago, and the University of Pennsylvania study scattered tablets, later copies, and broken traditions with careful restraint. The fact is clear. The surviving record gives fragments, not a final answer. And perhaps that is right. A complete answer would feel too modern, too neat, too eager to tidy the ancient dark. The tablets do something better. They leave you with a pattern. Humans are made for service, yet become skilled. Humans are limited, yet remember. Humans are punished, yet survive. Humans are taught, yet interpret. The clay keeps opening. You stand at the edge of a ruined city as evening gathers. The temple platform is worn down by centuries of wind. Bricks have collapsed into low ridges. Pottery shards lie half buried in dust. The river has shifted away, leaving the old place stranded beneath a wide, pale sky. Nothing here speaks loudly. Still, everything seems to listen. A quirky truth of archaeology is that ruins often look less dramatic than imagination expects. No glowing portal waits under every mound. Sometimes the great revelation is a broken drain, a cracked bowl, or a tablet about sheep. History has always enjoyed making grandeur humble. Yet humility is part of the revelation. The gods feared, perhaps, not a single rebellion, but accumulation. A mind formed through labour, a city formed through cooperation, a memory formed through writing, a prayer formed through pain, a tradition formed through survival. Each part looks small. Together, they become difficult to govern. That is human potential, not perfection, not conquest. Becoming. There is an open scholarly debate over how far myth should be read as theology, social memory, political reflection, or poetic imagination. Some researchers emphasize temple systems and labour. Others highlight divine psychology, environmental disaster, or scribal creativity. The debate continues because the tablets hold many truths at once. They are not doors into certainty. They are lamps in mist. You look back toward the imagined beginning, where clay received breath and burden. You look toward the cities, where the burden became skill. You look toward the flood, where destruction failed to silence memory. You look toward the scribes, who gave dead voices a place to wait. The story has not moved in a straight line. It has circled like water in a reed marsh. Perhaps the gods feared human independence. Perhaps they feared human noise. Perhaps they feared that a creature made to serve would learn enough to question service itself. Perhaps they feared being remembered too clearly by beings who were supposed to vanish. Or perhaps fear is our word, not theirs. Maybe what the tablets preserve is divine uncertainty. The unease of makers watching creation deepen beyond command. The discomfort of rulers who discover that subjects possess inner lives. The strange vulnerability of gods whose earthly names depend upon human tongues. To be worshipped is powerful. To be remembered is risky, because memory changes what it holds. Every copied tablet, every retold myth, every whispered prayer alters the relationship between heaven and earth. The gods enter human time, and human time is restless. It preserves, compares, doubts, softens, sharpens, and sometimes forgives. The gods may live above history, but their stories live inside it. The ruined city darkens. A little wind moves dust across the ground. You imagine the last inhabitants leaving through a gate, carrying tools, children, jars, and whatever memories they can bear. They do not know which names will survive. They do not know which tablets will be found. They do not know that strangers far away in time will listen for them. Yet they carry the flame. A mother carries a song. A scribe carries a sign. A worker carries knowledge of water. A child carries fear of storms. These are not grand monuments, but they are history's true vessels. The human future rarely travels in one royal inscription. It travels in repeated gestures, taught skills, remembered warnings, and quiet hopes passed across ordinary evenings. The oldest clay reveals no final victory. The gods are not defeated. Humanity is not crowned. The system is not broken into simple freedom. People remain vulnerable to hunger, power, weather, sickness, and the silence of heaven. But they are not empty. They are not merely clay pressed into service. They carry a dangerous inward brightness, a brightness that asks, a brightness that learns, a brightness that remains. Perhaps that is enough to trouble eternity. Night settles over the mound. Stars appear one by one, the same patient lights watched by farmers, priests, kings, and scribes. The air cools, the dust loses its heat. Somewhere far away, a modern museum drawer holds a tablet under careful glass, waiting without impatience. The old signs remain. They do not tell you everything. They do not explain every god, every motive, every missing line. They ask you to sit with uncertainty and feel its weight. They ask you to accept that the ancient world is not a puzzle solved once, but a darkness entered gently. And in that darkness, the question remains, why would gods fear human potential? Maybe because humans remember what power hopes will fade. Maybe because humans turned suffering into story. Maybe because humans can be made for labour and still discover meaning. Maybe because the clay, once shaped, begins shaping the world in return. The tablet cools in your palm. The river moves beyond the dark. The ruins keep their silence. But the silence no longer feels empty. It feels full of unfinished voices, waiting for another listener, another breath, another hand to lift the clay from dust. And perhaps the story is not yet complete. The night softens now, and the old city loosens its hold upon your thoughts. The walls return to earth. The stars blur slightly at the edges. The river becomes only a low murmur, moving through darkness with no need to explain itself. You do not need to solve the tablets tonight. You can let them rest. Let the gods return to their high, silent places. Let the scribes close their baskets. Let the workers set down their tools beside the canal. Let the lamps in the temple fade one by one until only a faint glow remains behind the reed screens. The clay has spoken enough. The oldest questions can stay unfinished. Some mysteries are not doors to force open, but rooms where the mind grows quiet. You have walked among mud brick walls, listened to broken signs, watched floodwater rise and fall, and followed human memory as it carried its small flame through ruin. Now the flame becomes gentle. It is no longer dangerous, it is only warm. Breathe slowly and imagine the tablet placed back upon soft cloth. Dust settles around it. The archive grows still, outside. The wind crosses the plain, touching reeds, stones, and sleeping fields. Nothing demands an answer. The ancient world drifts away, but not completely. It remains like a mark pressed into clay, faint and lasting. It remains in the thought that even fragile beings can remember, rebuild, and wonder. It remains in the quiet space between fear and hope, where humanity has always lived. Let that space become calm. Let the river carry the last questions into darkness. Let the old gods sleep, and let the clay dream on. End of script. Good night.